It's pretty cool. We did it last night also, where we had it both in Zoom and on live stream, and it worked really great. And we're officially live. All right. But I'm not going to look at it because it's really weird to me from this end. All right, hold on. My presentation's opening. Okay. Here we go. So we've got 685 attendees, which is this? I'm sharing it. Oh, I got to share my screen. Okay. There we go. All right. We've got 685 attendees coming to you from 5 countries and 30 states, all arranged here, which I think is pretty great. I actually had one of our attendees email me today and ask if everything was in Eastern time, because we've actually got people from the West Coast, and like I said, different countries. So, yep, it's Eastern Standard Time. And I do want to welcome you all to the Type 1 Nation Summit. It's so great to have so many of you here, because as one of the things that we really like to say at JDRF is that we're stronger together. I tried to introduce you to Denise, but I did not see her on. Oh, there she is. I do want to bring her on because it's so important. So give me 1 second. I'm going to put her over to panelist. And then I'm going to make you a co-host so that everybody can see you. Denise is really the engine behind this. She works with her committee. Denise, you can put your video on now.
It's not letting me.
It should now. Oh, let me try it again. Hold on. Okay, now it should let you.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Are you in front of your?
I am. I don't know why I'm not up there, but
the background is just showing. Well,
I just want to say a big shout out to our planning committee for making this happen, and also a thank you to our co-chairs of this summit, Dr. Bridget Gregg and also Dr. Carrie Misakani Stout, both from the Michigan Medicine, University of Michigan Hospital. So thank you for all your leadership and help and making this happen. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much, Denise, and thank you for all your work on this. You know, originally this was going to be a live event in person, and so when it switched to video, that's where I came in. And fortunately, at JDRF, we have the tools to be able to do this now. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping with you to help you have a better experience tonight. First of all, you do have view options that can show how you view. You can swap your presentation with speaker view or the full screen. Hang on 1 second. You also have audio settings, but the most important things to know about are the ways you can engage with us. So chat, you can use to chat with each other. You know, you just keep in mind when you're putting this out there, it's going out to hundreds of people. But you can chat in the chat area, and that's right down at the bottom of your screen. You will see a little thing. I don't get it because I'm sharing my screen, but you will see chat, and you can chat with everybody. And then there's the Q&A box. When you bring up the Q&A box, you're typing a question to our presenter. That's where you want to put all your questions for the presenters, because that's where they're going to be pulling them from. And so if you put it in the chat, they might miss it. The chat you can use to put questions to each other, to other moms, other grandparents, other kids. But otherwise, put it in the Q&A area, and we'll be fielding through those through the night. And just so you know, if we don't get through all the questions, I'm able to download them after, and I will ask the presenter to get answers to the rest of your questions, and we'll put them out to you. So we really like for you to be social with us. Use the hashtags Type 1 Nation, Stronger Together, and JDRF. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I know there's a lot more, but I'm too old to know them, but I'm sure you do. So wherever you're social, please talk about tonight, take a picture of your screen with the presenter, and also share the live tube stream, which Crystal's going to put the live tube stream down there for you. She has also shared the link to our Facebook page, because starting at 6 o'clock, we have our kids camp, and Julia Mulvane has put together a great program for tonight for your kids to be engaged for an hour. So please send them over there. It's right on our Facebook page. You'll see that we're live at 6 p.m. We want to thank our healthcare heroes. Now more than ever, we know how, whoops, sorry. Okay, there we go. Now more than ever, we really want to thank them for all that they're doing to help those with COVID-19 and everybody else, and also fire personnel, police, people working the grocery stores and the gas stations, everyone that is helping keep the most important things going. We certainly want to do a shout out to. Lilly is in the face of COVID-19, they have stepped up, and sorry, my computer is doing things without me. And we want to thank them. They are our JDRF, our national JDRF One Walk and Type 1 Nation sponsor. And we want to thank you for all you're doing to help meet the needs of people living. This is what happens when you accidentally put auto time on. But to meet the needs of people living with diabetes during the COVID-19 crisis and every day. This financial assistance program is one of several options that can be accessed through the Lilly Diabetes Solution Center. So we've had to go virtual for a little while, at least until the end of June, which means our gala in both Grand Rapids and the Detroit area had to reimagine themselves. And so we're going to be doing it virtually, and we'd like everyone to join us this year. It's free. You just go online on June 4th. We'll be there having a great time. There's an amazing silent auction that night. And we want to thank our presenter, our presenting sponsor, Ford. Ford has been with us for several years, doing all kinds of funding for JDRF in so many different ways, and supporting the T1D community. And even though we're going virtual, they're staying right along with us and going virtual with us. So we really want to thank them. And actually, our president and CEO, Aaron Kowalski, has a special thank you for Ford and their employees, because very many Ford employees fundraise for us year round, and we are incredibly thankful. All right, what is going on?
Diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There is no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact each of you is having, and know that together we will cure T1D.
All right, I'm gonna. Sorry, this is what happens when you're using two. Come on. This is what happens when you're using two computers to manage this. Okay, got that one shut off. I'm going to play that again. I noticed the sound didn't go quite right. I'm sorry. Just give me one moment. Okay. Give me 1 second. All right, let's try this again.
How do we even begin to say thank you? Your support at Ford is making it so much better for me, Edsel Ford's son, and the more than 1.6 million people with type 1 diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There is no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact each of you is having, and know that together we will cure T1D.
All right. And walk is open. Join us this fall. Our walk registration is open. I know that there are walk families online. Time for you to join us. Crystal, Sarah, Jillian, April, and I all say it's time to get online and register. We'd love to see you this fall. Hopefully we'll all be able to be together by then. That's our hope that we're going for, and we'd love to see your teams. If you're a new family to JDRF, go ahead and register. Yeah. Okay. Crystal, can you give me a shout out if you guys can hear me okay?
I hear you just fine. You're doing great.
I finally figured that part out. All right. By Thursday, I'm going to be so great at Zoom. We want to say thank you to our JDRF volunteers. Together, we are stronger. And this is all of our JDRF Michigan and Northwest Ohio staff and a few other kids that are wonderful, and dogs, saying thank you. This is National Volunteer Week. And this week and every week, we want you to know how much we value you and value all of the help you give us each and every day. So volunteers are also the key to our fundraising efforts. But with many of JDRF's biggest spring fundraising events canceled or postponed, future research is in jeopardy. In order to meet this challenge, we are asking our supporters who are able to contribute to our Fund a Cure program. Fund a Cure provides JDRF with the dollars needed to move therapies and technologies out of the labs and into the waiting hands of the T1D community. 100% of your Fund a Cure contribution goes directly to our mission and is fully tax deductible. Although these are uncertain times, when so many things seem beyond our control, one thing we can control and take pride in is ensuring JDRF's mission to cure type 1 diabetes continues. Our youth ambassador, Kendall, who can tell it a lot better than me, would like to tell you how your donations have helped her live a better life.
Hi, my name is Kendall Chamberlain and I have T1D. Thanks to donations to JDRF from people like you, I am able to be more independent. I participate in many school activities. I also perform in dance and theater. Since I was diagnosed at 7, my treatment has gotten easier to manage. I now use a CGM to monitor my sugar and an insulin pump that delivers insulin throughout the day. Your continued support means that our lives will only get easier. Thank you for all your support.
Well, thank you, Kendall. I have to tell you, I have to do a big shout out to Kendall because she did several videos for us this week. And as you can tell, she's pretty great at it. But we're just going to ask you, give now. And together we will be the people known as the ones who cure diabetes. Crystal's going to add the donation link, which she's already done, that you have to select it and then paste it into your browser, but it'll bring you right to the Fund to Cure donation page and you can make your donation. I'd love to see many donations when we get off of this, off of these calls today, these meetings. So now we're going to bring on our first speaker. So if Dr. Triplett could turn on his audio and video, and I'm going to make you a co-host to make sure you can turn on your video. And there's Dr. Triplett. All right. Hello, Dr. Triplett. Thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Triplett is currently an associate professor of medicine at the University of Texas Health at San Antonio. He is actively involved with research, clinical, and the education of people with diabetes and healthcare professionals training at the Texas Diabetes Institute in San Antonio. So Dr. Triplett's going to join us now and do his presentation.
All right, so I'm pushing to the presentation. I'm assuming I'm gonna share now, correct?
Yeah, and make sure you select at the bottom of the share box to optimize your sound from your computer. The two little check boxes in the share box, you're going to see at the bottom of it.
There we go.
Yeah, share computer sound and whatever the other one was, and it will make it much better, I have learned.
Are you able to see it?
Yes, perfectly. And I'm going to stop my video now and just focus on you.
Okay. Well, hey, I want to just thank you guys so much for allowing me to come to you guys to talk tonight. Certainly is my pleasure, and I know in these extraordinary times, all these things come together to make us go, hey, I can't believe we're having a meeting virtually, but I truly think that this is going to be the future for a lot of different things because of the fact that the interactivity is incredible. So thank you to the JDRF, of course, thank you to all their sponsors. And of course, today I have to thank Xeris too, because Xeris is one of the ones that have allowed me to come and talk to you tonight. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to explore a situation that none of us ever really want to happen. But as they say, preparation is half the victory. And so tonight what we're going to be talking about is ways of preparing for some situations which we hope we never happen. And of course, that leads us down in the know to conversations about severe low blood sugar and treatment options. The first thing I want to do is to explain to you guys that even though we're virtual, we'll still be interactive in some ways. So I want you guys to look closely here. First of all, what it is you can either go to the pollev.com. And if you go to pollev.com, what you can see is that pollev.com, which you can, I'm going to go back here. Apologies. pollev.com, what you're going to see here is that you can actually answer these questions I'm going to give you. The other way of doing it is text hypo to 22333, and that's going to enter you into the system to answer the questions. Now, you go, well, what happens when I enter my number or this website? Nothing. They're not keeping track of you. They're not going to handle your number for later or anything like this. This is completely just an educational poll for us to be more interactive in this virtual way of doing it. So I'm going to give you just a second to text in or to log in and do that particular information, because the next step is we're going to do a sample question. The other thing to remember is that while you're doing that, I want to remind you that unfortunately, this talk is on label. And what that means is that I am bound by the rules of the FDA to tell you certain things and to not tell you certain things. And so I do want you to be understanding of this particular point. As Tammy had mentioned, if there's questions that you want answered offline that I unfortunately can't answer, I'm going to email you back. I'm going to try to answer your question to the best of my ability. If I can't answer it, I will tell you that, because right now I'm talking to so many people that you never know who's listening. And
Dr. Triplett?
Yes.
Can you turn up your volume on your computer?
Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. So let's go to the question and see if this is going to work out for us, okay? All right. Oh, you guys, look at you. You're already there. So what we're asking here is how many years have you had diabetes, or if a caregiver, how long has the person you've been caring for been diagnosed with diabetes? And what you're seeing here is you're literally seeing the numbers coming in as we speak. It's A. So you type in the letter A. If you're on text, it would be that you're newly diagnosed less than 1 year. If you type in B, 1 year to 2 years, C, 2 to 5 years, D, 5 to 10 years, or E, 10 years. If you just simply put in E and put it in, it will actually come up on your screen. And what you're seeing in real time is that we have most of you either are a caregiver or a person with diabetes for more than 10 years. And that's not surprising with us. So as you can see, we're actually getting a nice number of people coming in and out. So one of the things I like to do is kind of get a feel for who's in the audience as we do this. So that's one of the things I'm doing right now. So the other thing to think about is as we move on, and that's what I'm going to do right now is move on past this poll, is to think about what situations we're in where this would be appropriate. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Tom. So remember, we've all had these people that we've interacted with. This happens to be someone who is a real person, but interacted a little bit. And so Tom was a 25-year-old person with type 1 diabetes, and he and his fiance were out on a bike ride. He had a CGM, so he was pretty in the know, and he was riding along, and all of a sudden he felt funny, and he checked his sugar. It was 45, but he noticed the CGM arrows, as you guys know, were going down. And so he ate his carbohydrates. In this case, he had Skittles and raisins. When he got to the end of that, the sugar was still going down. Of course, at that point, everyone started to be a little more worried. And then what happened was that they were able to go to a local convenience store, and the fiance got more. When the fiance got more carbohydrates, she came back. By that time, his glucose was 26. He was able at that time to actually take in more carbohydrate from multiple sources, and his sugar thankfully started to come back up. And when they retested it, the CGM showed it was going up. So the thing about this is he was really in survival mode. And it's one of those situations you go, well, we're talking about glucagon today. Was glucagon appropriate for Tom? The answer is a little more complicated, and really we have to get a little more deep into it. And we're going to talk about that as we go through the presentation tonight. So the next question I have for you guys is, how often does someone with type 1 diabetes experience a severe low blood sugar episode on average? Is it A, rare, less than 1 episode every 10 years? Is it B, 1 episode every 5 years? C, 1 episode per year? Or is it D, 1 episode per month? Well, interestingly enough, most of you are choosing D. So that does mean that we have a group of people who have had diabetes for a while, as you had said before. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that we talk about this a little bit more. And I'm going to give you the answer on the next slide, so we might as well switch. So what are we talking about? Well, actually what we're doing is we're talking about severe lows happening maybe in about 1 episode per year in general. So severe lows happen not only in type 1 diabetes, but can also occur in type 2 diabetes, especially in people on insulin or on certain oral medications such as sulfonylureas, which help us to actually release insulin from our pancreas. Obviously, in type 1s, we take insulin, and that's why we're at higher risk for hypoglycemia, because the insulin cannot stop. It simply does its job. It lowers sugar. If it does its job too well, we can have a low blood sugar reaction. So again, in most studies that have been shown, around 3 or 4 out of 10 people are having 1 to 3 severe lows per year. What that means in type 1 diabetes is the fact that we're literally talking about maybe a smaller proportion of people having a higher risk. And so our main thing is that we need to, one, address how we're going to overcome these barriers. And number two, we need to see how we can quickly treat that, because severe hypoglycemia has potentially severe consequences. And we'll talk more about that as we talk about the pathophysiology and some of these other things that we like to talk about for hypoglycemia. Now, an important and surprising point is the fact that we actually know that most people who are at higher risk of having hypoglycemic reaction have strict glycemic control, or as you guys were saying, about 2/3 of you said you actually were had diabetes for more than 10 years. So the biggest two factors were duration of diabetes and how strict a glycemic control you had. And in our current situation, we're asking for most people to have an A1C minimally less than 7, unless there's something else going on. Obviously, someone, if you look at this slide, says a hemoglobin A1C less than 7% made the person have a higher risk of severe hypoglycemia. But it wasn't the only people that were at risk. As you see, from 7 to 8 to 9, there was still a risk. And so that becomes a little more interesting about how is it that people who even have an A1C of 9% can be at risk of a severe hypoglycemic reaction? And the answer is, we're going to go over some of the factors, and you'll see if someone makes a big mistake, sometimes even if you have a hemoglobin A1C of 9%, which would mean your sugar is over 200 maybe, you would still potentially have a higher risk. All right. So the other thing that we don't talk about much, and this is something that Dr. Polanski talks about a lot, if you know who I'm speaking about, he talks a lot about the fact that this is such a worrisome thing to people with diabetes. Once you've had one, it's such a debilitating thing that once you've had some low blood sugars in the future, you worry about them. Now, when we're just human beings, so what happens is that a lot of times when we have a low blood sugar, we say, well, I would like to avoid that in the future. And sometimes what that means is that we literally avoid it by having our sugars run higher. And about 2/3 to maybe even 84% in type 2 diabetes would say, I fear having a hypoglycemic reaction in the future. That is a logical reaction, okay? When you've had low blood sugars, you realize they're not fun and they can be debilitating. But I also want to remind the people with diabetes listening that perhaps beside you right now, or even listening as the primary person, is a caretaker of a person with diabetes. And caretakers have the same kinds of fears, that they're going to be put in situations, or their loved one's going to be put in situations where they're not there to help, or when they're in situations where they need the help, and people who are not as skilled as them are going to have to take care of you or the person that you love. So we need to make sure that in those situations that we try to make these treatment options very easy to use. Which brings us to our next poll everywhere question. What is glucagon? Is it A, an injected form of glucose? Is it B, a hormone released by the liver that lowers blood glucose levels? Is it C, a hormone that works to raise blood glucose levels? Is it D, none of the above? Or E, the one that helps you? I'm not sure. Very good. So we have a very learned audience tonight. Congratulations. We're upwards of almost 75. So 3 out of 4 people are understanding that glucagon is a hormone that helps to raise blood glucose. So this is important because if you said it's an injected form of glucose, we're going to talk about all these different things. That was the second most common answer. So the natural hormones of glucagon and insulin work in our body. So if you have type 1, you take insulin. The insulin may be modified, but it's still a natural hormone. And you can see on the screen that what happens is when your sugar goes up, we want to take insulin, and insulin helps to bring the sugar back down. That's what insulin's job is. Insulin helps suck up sugar into cells, and also it goes to the liver, and it tells the liver, don't make so much sugar so I don't have to cover as much. But as our sugar comes down, what happens is when it starts going towards normal, glucagon kicks in, and glucagon is released from the same pancreas that insulin is released from. Of course, in type 1, we know that you're taking it in an injection. But in people without diabetes, what you're seeing is glucagon kicks in, and it helps to keep your sugar from going too low. Now, what we do in emergency situations, of course, is we give that hormone glucagon to help the body get over the low blood sugar. Let's look about this a little bit more. This is a little more fun slide, and what you're seeing is that literally these work in tandem, the yin and yang of the pancreas. So what's happening is as your sugar goes up, we want insulin around to bring your sugar back towards normal. But as your sugar starts to decrease towards normal, and I use sugar and glucose interchangeably as a simple term, remember that glucagon will start to be released. Now, in type 1 diabetes, of course, we don't make insulin. In type 2 diabetes, there's a relative deficiency in insulin. In type 1 diabetes, there's really no problem with glucagon. Type 2 diabetes, they actually have a little bit too much glucagon. Bottom line is that insulin kind of acts as the brake. Like on
Dr. Triplett, I'm sorry. We just had a couple more people say that they can't hear you. So if you could just talk super loudly.
Sure, I turn it up as much as I can.
Okay.
I'll talk you. Is this better? If I talk even
now I can hear you loudly. If I will let you know if they tell me again that they can't.
Yeah, please do. Sorry that that's happening.
That's okay.
So insulin acts as the brake, kind of like on your car. So when you push on the brake, things slow down. Your glucose would come down because insulin is bringing it down. And of course, glucagon is acting kind of like the gas pedal. So you press on the gas pedal, you expect something to go. It's putting more energy into the system. That's what glucagon is doing for us. Glucagon is literally helping you put more energy in the system in the form of glucose. So that's how this system works. In a severe low blood sugar, what's happening is that we're giving the body the ability to release more glucose. Now, during low blood sugar episodes, what happens is that when your sugar is mildly low, you can have some symptoms, some shaking, maybe your heart pumps a little bit, you feel sweaty, hungry, and this is called mild hypoglycemia. And appropriately, when we talk about this, we usually tell people about the 15-15 rule. And if you're not familiar, talk to your diabetes educators, but in brief, we want you to take in 15 grams of a fast-acting carbohydrate and then recheck your sugar in 15 minutes, or in a CGM, you can see if it's coming back up. That would be in mild hypoglycemia, which is somewhere between 54 to 70 milligrams per deciliter. They call this level 1. The other thing to remember is that if it's below 54, you can start to have some other symptoms. So especially when it's severely low, you can see behavioral changes. This can go as far as dizziness, confusion, tremors, blurred or double vision. And even if it's very severe, if you get to severe low blood sugar, you can see loss of consciousness. Anytime someone cannot take in oral carbohydrate or actually needs or is unconscious, that would be someone who would be a candidate to take a glucagon. And we'll talk more about this as we move along. Now, here are all the things that can affect your glucose. And this is why some people, even with a high sugar, are at risk. So remember that if someone is sedentary, but then does a much more intense physical activity, and you go, well, that could just be simply that the person goes to an adventure park, or they go to Disneyland, or they're walking around the mall for a few hours when they normally would be very sedentary. That's enough activity for someone, even with a high glucose, to potentially go low. Remember, they skip a meal because they were out and about and they didn't eat. Erratic schedules, stress. It could be things such as management-related factors. Perhaps the pump had an error. Perhaps they used two insulins or used the wrong insulin. And even individual factors, such as people who are a little older, they don't have the same brisk response in those hormones as people who are younger. Also, what happens, of course, is in type 1 diabetes, as you guys know, sometimes you can take a half a unit of insulin and your sugar will go down 60, 80 milligrams per deciliter. Sometimes you take that half unit, maybe some people it only goes down 20 milligrams per deciliter. So that's why we have to be cognizant of that all the time. The fact that all these different factors can sometimes come together in the perfect bad storm in order for you to be at risk of a severe low. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer this question. So when should glucagon be administered? When the person is passed out, A. When the person is having a seizure, B. If the person is unable or unwilling to take carbohydrates by mouth, C. If the person is unresponsive, D. E is only the first two, or F is all of the above. Well, I think this one, you guys, we've been talking a little bit about it. So 4 out of 5 of you have this correct. When the person passes out, because they can no longer take oral carbohydrates, they need glucagon. When the person is having a seizure, that usually means the person is passing out, they need glucagon. If the person is unable or unwilling to take carbohydrates by mouth, this is the one that confuses people. What that says is when you get to the point where the person is no longer cooperative, when the person, you don't want them to choke. That's one of the biggest risks of trying to give people oral things when they can't really swallow well, when the sugar is so low. So what happens is that we have to realize that when it gets that low, that they could be a candidate for glucagon too. If the person is unresponsive, that's the same thing. So very good. Most of you are actually on track with WAP. So just to reiterate that and to re-emphasize that, unable, unresponsive, unwilling, unable to take safe in carbohydrates, and that could be at any glucose. So though we like to say, oh, if the sugar is below 54 milligrams per deciliter, the answer is if the sugar is 55, 60, and the person can't take in oral carbohydrates, glucagon is appropriate. Unresponsive, the person can't answer basic questions, is being irritated, they're not thinking correctly, or they're having symptoms that you think they might pass out, or unwilling. And that means a lot of times people get combative or confused, as we were just mentioning. Now, there are a lot of different products on the market, and one of those is the tried and true glucagon injection kit, which is still out there. We're not trying to tell you this kit will not work. That is absolutely not true. What we are trying to tell you is that this glucagon injection kit is one of the reasons why many people feel uncomfortable with this situation. So what happens is the fact that it has to be put into this complex form because glucagon is a very unstable hormone. What happens is that if you put it with water, it will degrade almost immediately. Even we in research, I do research in diabetes, we have to use special stabilizers for glucagon to keep it from degrading once we draw blood from people in research. And this is true if you actually go and get blood drawn for glucagon. So we have to be very careful with glucagon because it's so unstable. This has always been the problem, and that's why there's two different. There's the glucagon, and then there's the diluent. Now, the problem goes with all the steps. You see currently what I'm showing you on your slide is 9 different steps that have to be done in order for this to happen. In many of the studies that have looked at this, about 4 out of 5 people who attempted it did something wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that they always weren't able to get it in, but some of these steps are extremely important and put the person at higher risk. One of the most common things that happens is the fact that they had difficulty in mixing. So when you put the water into the diluent, it doesn't always go into solution right away, but because you feel anxious, you pull it back out, it's not the full dose and you inject it. Another thing that's happened, I've heard about this personally, is the fact that the person took it out, said, well, here's the injectable, did not use the little vial because they couldn't figure out what it was and just injected the placebo. So we have to remember there is still education that has to go on with this. But remember, we're talking about how can we simplify the process. So just as a mini review, glucagon is something you needed to have on hand to be prepared. It's half the battle to be prepared. It is the one product I and most of the people listening hope you will never have to use. We hope that what happens is that you get a glucagon kit, it expires, you get another one, it expires, you get another one, it expires. You never have to use it. But preparation is half the victory. So we have to prepare for the potential thing that could happen. Remember also, in the story, it doesn't work if you don't have it with you. So Tom did not have his glucagon with him, but he did have glucagon. It was at home, which means it didn't help Tom at all. So we must keep the glucagon close to us and on us at all times in order for it to be a potential saving medication. So again, carbohydrates with you at all time, fast acting, and your glucagon injection. People who take insulin injections are at higher risk. People who, and that's true whether it's type 1 or type 2. Glucagon will raise your sugar if your sugar is low. So today what we're talking about is a simple process. This is called Gvoke. It's a glucagon injection, and it's a pre-filled syringe that already has the glucagon in solution. It's pre-mixed and it's pre-measured. And what that means is that literally what you do is it's a two-step process, and at the end of the two-step process, the glucagon is injected, unlike the 9 or 10 steps I showed you before. So if we talk about this just a little bit more, what you're seeing here is Gvoke, as we call it, is just under 4 inches long. It comes with a very tiny needle. It's subcutaneous. So a lot of times the other ones, one of the things that happened was that because it actually can be giving subcutaneous or into the muscle, sometimes people even broke the needle off of the person because they were being so aggressive, because it's a very panicky situation. So again, this is subcutaneous. And what happens is that it's 27 gauge needle, and it comes in a pouch. And you don't have to open the pouch until sometimes, hopefully you never have to open the pouch. But if you do, you don't open it until you're going to use it. And in usability studies, what they found is because it's so simple that 99% of the people are actually able to use it without problems. And that means we simply told them once, do this, two-step process. 99% of the people were able to do that on return when they came back in, say, a week. That's very important to understand. So we're just trying to make this delivery simple. Here are the 2 steps you need. You take it out of the pouch, you pull off the needle cap, and then you basically insert the needle at a 90-degree angle, even if you're skinny, even if you're a child, 90-degree angle, and you push the plunger to inject. It is recommended in the lower abdomen, the thigh, or the upper arm. And in an emergency, one of the things I tell you is it's better to get it in than not. Also remember that glucagon doesn't act immediately. It takes up to 15 minutes for these kind of effects to happen. So when you're getting to the point where the person is close to feeling it, we need to start thinking about glucagon, because it's still going to be around 15 minutes to get some of that full effect of the medication. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along. The dosing is very simple. It's approved for ages 2 to adult. If you're an adult or a child who weighs 100 pounds or more, you would take the blue one, which is a 1 milligram. That would be the dose. If you weigh less than 100 pounds, then you would take the red one, which is a 0.5 milligram. Now, the other thing to remember about this versus the other glucagon way that was done before is the amount in here is a much smaller amount. It's only 0.1 to 0.2 milliliters as opposed to a full milliliter of solution to inject. So we just have to remember that it's a very small amount to inject. So we want to make sure we put the needle in and then inject. Now, the next thing a lot of people have told me is, oh, well, how effective is it? Well, we need to remember that we have about 100% treatment success if you look at increasing glucose greater than 25 milligrams per deciliter in children, and 99% in adults, and that means in about 15 minutes. The other thing to remember, and a lot of people are worried about, is they say, well, I'm worried that I take that and it's going to raise my sugar so high I'm at risk of diabetic ketoacidosis, or that I'm going to have to cover it later. And the answer is, the average maximum glucose in the studies was somewhere between about 130, 120 to about 180. And what that means is that even though you're giving the glucagon, it didn't raise the sugar so high in a hypoglycemic reaction that the person said, oh my gosh, now I have to cover it with insulin. It just didn't happen. All medications have side effects. All glucagons have side effects. For Gvoke, what happens is that glucagon is a hormone that raises sugar, but it does it in a way that actually causes nausea in some patients, even low sugar, and sometimes even vomiting. So the first thing we tell you, if you give an injection of glucagon, make sure if the person is passed out, you push them to their side, because if they get nauseous and vomit, you don't want them to aspirate some of those things back in. The other thing is some of them people will get headaches. Small number of people will have quote unquote hyperglycemia. Some people get a little abdominal pain, a little injection site reactions, but let's be clear, about 83% of these were mild. All of them were in the categories of mild or moderate. And I know that's a technical term, but what it means is that there were no severe bad reactions in people. So
Dr.
if you
Strickland?
would, yeah, go ahead.
This is just a warning to you. We're just about running out of time, and I want to get to a few questions.
Yeah, I need to do the safety information and then I'll get to it, okay?
You got it.
So this is the last slide I have to do. So Gvoke is so this is one of those I have to talk to you about. It's the important safety information. So Gvoke is a prescription medicine to treat low blood sugars. Do not use Gvoke if you have a tumor. And this is technical stuff. I'm sorry, but I have to read it. It's part of the ways of doing this presentation. If you have a tumor or a gland on top of your kidneys, adrenal gland or a pheochromocytoma, and you would know that if you did, you cannot use this particular medicine or any glucagon for that matter. It can cause high blood pressure, low blood sugar. Gvoke can cause low blood sugar. It's a short-acting medicine. So remember, once you get your sugar back up, you still have to start taking oral carbohydrates in to keep your sugar up until you get to more health. In rare cases, it can cause serious skin rash, and especially in people who have a tumor in their pancreas called a glucagonoma. And serious allergic reactions have happened. If that would happen for you, like a rash, difficulty breathing, low blood sugar, low blood pressure, pardon me, you need to get help immediately, which of course means calling 911. So before getting Gvoke, tell your healthcare provider about your medical conditions to make sure it's appropriate for you. It is stored at room temperature. So there's a couple ways of getting it. You can get it through PillPack, Amazon. Ask your provider to give it. I have never denied someone a prescription for glucagon if they thought they were at risk. And I think that's important for you to understand. There are copay cards. Ask your provider. There's some online. Ask for a representative. And what you're going to find is these copay cards, especially if you have insurance, are going to help you a lot. And so here's your summary slide. So just so we all know, this is one way of getting it in. This is one of the newest products on the market for glucagon administration. I hope you never have to use it, but if you do, it's a very simple, easy to use product in a situation versus the other glucagon, older style kits that are out there. Not more effective, but easier to use. Okay, now we'll do some questions. Back to you, Tammy. I'm not hearing you, Tammy. Are you muted? You're muted.
When is the expiration on these?
The expiration on it is 2 years. I always encourage people, though, to make sure that when you go and get it from the pharmacy, that you look at the expiration of the medicine they're trying to give you, because occasionally you'll find a pharmacy that doesn't use this that often. You want to make sure you get the full benefit of the 2 years, 24 months expiration from the Gvoke product.
And what's the accessibility for it and the age range on it?
So as mentioned, 2 years or older is who could use it. And then we talked about the different dosing depending on if you're less than 100 pounds or a child less than 12, you would actually take the 0.5 milligram. If you're more than 100 pounds, even if you're a child or an adult, you would take the 1 milligram. So it depends on age and it depends on weight. And of course, if you're an adult, you would always take the higher dose. Great.
And how many Gvoke syringes would be what a doctor prescribed, for example, a 3-month supply?
So this is the kind of medicine that we would prescribe until you would come back and tell us that you needed another one. Of course, that's our key to start talking about why did you have to use the glucagon. So I usually recommend you get a 2-pack, but it really depends on your insurance. If you can get a 2-pack, I usually recommend you keep one at the most common places you're going to be at. So that usually is going to be a home and a work one, but each person is different. But if you have 2, at least you're going to have 1 in 2 different locations. Or the other thing is if you happen to have one that you think, you left it in the car for a couple of weeks or something, at least you still have the other one until you talk to your provider. But again, a 3-month supply would be, it's good until you use it up to that 24-month period expiration. So just remind yourself about that. And again, if you use it, make sure and tell your provider about it so that they can start talking about why you had to use it.
And a few people have asked, When is a low considered severe?
There is no definition of a sugar level. That's one of the things that was built into it because everyone is so different. Um, and I say that not to confuse people. A severe low blood sugar means that you're unable to do the things that you would normally do in low blood sugar. So, for example, if you cannot take in oral carbohydrates, no matter what your sugar is, you would be a candidate for glucagon. And in fact, there are instances, as you know of, where people in certain situations take mini dosing of glucagon. Gvoke is not currently approved for such considerations, but it is something that we talk to our patients about. That bottom line is, if you can't take an oral carbohydrate, you're a candidate. Does that mean when you're passed out? Yes. But the one that most confuses people is when they get to that point where they're a little irritable, or they're a little combative, or they're having some issues with the carbohydrate going down. Those are the people we're saying inject the glucagon now, because again, in 15 minutes, we don't know exactly where that person will be. We hope that their hormones are enough to bounce their blood glucose back up. But if not, the glucagon is already on board and it's not going to hurt the person. Again, if you give the glucagon, it's not like the sugar now goes up to 300 or 400. It's going to bounce back up into the hundreds on average.
And can you see this being used in a closed loop pump system sometime in the future?
Currently, there's a lot of different research studies going on into this. I know that it is something that multiple companies are interested in. Any stable form of glucagon at room temperature could potentially be used in this particular situation. And that's something, of course, in the future, we all hope we get is a dual hormone pump. But right now, there are no approved glucagon products for dual hormone pump delivery.
All right. And I'm going to ask you one more, and then if you stay on for a few minutes after, you can turn off your video and mute yourself, but you can still go on and type an answer to some of these that you have the answer to. So
Sure.
just so you know, and everybody will see your answers. But I will ask you one more. Can you inject this through clothing?
The answer is yes. You can inject it through clothing. It is a subcutaneous needle, so we do have to be a little bit careful when we say what the clothing is. Obviously, up in Michigan, you might be a little more worried about winter coats and things like that, and warmer clothes. But in a general sense of the word, yes, you could inject it through clothing as a backup. Now, of course, that's a diabetes educator type of thing that I'm telling you. It's not specific to this particular glucagon. Any injectable glucagon in general is what we're talking about. It's a general principle that us diabetes educators usually tell people.
Great, thank you. So like I said, once you turn off your video, stop sharing, and then turn off your video and mute when we're done talking. But you could still stay as a co-host and answer those by typing the answers in.
Be very glad to do that. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Triplett. This was wonderful to hear about. Thank you. Yep, it's up at the, yep, exactly. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. Oh, hang on. All right, so in just a minute, we're going to bring up our next speaker, and I'm going to ask that Amy and Dr. Elshoff get ready, because I'll be bringing you up in just a minute. But I wanted to let you all to know that we'd like you to lend us your voice. We'd like you to join our advocacy community to further research funding and advance legislative priorities in support of T1D. And that means that you want to, for example, when we need you to speak up to your representative, we're gonna send you texts or email you, and we'll send you exactly what you need to do. It's a great way to support JDRF and the diabetes community as a whole, as by being a JDRF advocate. And it's simple. You just take out your cell phone and you text ACT to 53731, or you visit jdrf.org/join. And Crystal will put that jdrf.org/join in the, oh, she put it all in there because she's that wonderful. It's right there in your chat box, but please become an advocate with us. I'm going to do a little basic housekeeping because I know some of you started after the first conversation. As you've noticed, I've got your video turned off and your audio turned off. That's because we have over 600 people registered for tonight, and it gets a bit chaotic when we let you all on. So, but we want you to engage with us. And you can do that by using the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you float over it, you'll see a chat option. When you chat in there, just keep in mind it goes to everyone. I made a mistake yesterday, but you could ask questions. You can ask questions of the other attendees, not the panelists. I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute. You can give advice of things that you've done that work, or just give a shout out to the presenters. Now, if you want to ask questions of the presenters, you want to pick up your Q&A box, which is also down there. You'll see Q&A, and the questions that go in there, you will be able to ask those questions, and we will get them answered from Dr. Elsholz at the end of his presentation. So there's that to do as well. You can also change your presenter view. Just play around with these tools in the upper right corner, and you'll see how there's different ways that you can see the presenters larger if you want to. You can see all the presenters on the screen. Just play around with it. You can't break anything, and see what works best for you. Promise Ball and Rock for the Cure. Detroit and Grand Rapids. As you know, right now, we don't have the ability to do events live. We don't get to see you, which is unfortunate, but we are going to do them live. We're going to do them virtually live. We're joining the two together. And on June 4th, we're going to host our Promise Ball. And we want all of you to join us. It's free to join this year. You're going to join us online. We have an amazing silent auction with some great stuff that I plan on bidding on. And it's going to be all done online on your phone. You can bid. You can see when someone's outbid you. It's pretty great. And we'll have some entertainment and I'm sure a lot of inspiration. So I hope you're able to join us. And I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Ford, for being a big part of this. Ford has been a sponsor and a supporter of us and the T1D community for many years. And this year, even though we're going virtual, they're still all in and going virtual right along with us. So a big thank you to Ford. And we want to thank our JDRF volunteers. This is National Volunteer Week. So what better week to have you on with us? But not only this week, but every week and every day. You are what makes this possible. You're what makes this all happen. Thank you so much. You know, we're a small but mighty staff. But if we didn't have our volunteers, and this is our staff, but it's also some of their kids, which is just awesome, and dogs, saying thank you. Thank you so much for everything you do. So as you know, right now, things are a little bit different for everyone. Volunteers are key to our fundraising efforts, but with many of JDRF's biggest spring fundraising events canceled or postponed, future research is in jeopardy. In order to meet this challenge, we are asking our supporters who are able to contribute to our Fund a Cure program. Fund a Cure provides JDRF with the dollars needed to move therapies and technologies out of the lab and into the waiting hands of the T1D community. 100% of your Fund a Cure contributions goes directly to our mission and is fully tax deductible. Although these are uncertain times when so many things seem beyond our control, only one thing we can control and take pride in. That's ensuring JDRF's mission to cure type 1 diabetes continues. And I've got our youth ambassador, Lexi, here to tell you why it's so important. Hold on. Now I gotta stop it again. 1 second.
Hanging out with my friends, coaching youth cheerleaders in my city, going to school athletic and social events are all things I can do now independently. Since I was diagnosed at age 11, my treatment has gotten more self-manageable thanks to the constant advancements in technologies of insulin pumps and CGMs. Your continued support means that our lives will only get easier. Thank you.
Needed to Now is it still? Nope. Okay, it's just me. Hopefully you can all hear me. Crystal, can you guys hear me? You can hear me? Okay. Sorry, I'm working 2 computers at once, and every so often it throws me. But please give now, and together we will be known as the people who cure diabetes. And next, we're going to bring up our next presentation. And to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Elsholz, is Amy Stagg from the Diabetic Partners in Action Coalition. She's going to introduce Dr. Elsholz for his presentation on telehealth visits and diabetes, what's working and what's not. And while she's doing that, Crystal is going to share the DPAC link in the chat room so that if you're interested in learning more, you can go there and learn more about DPAC. And Dr. Triplett, you can turn on your audio and video at this time now also. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Dr. Elsholz, turn on your audio and video.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Good evening. I'm so pleased to join everyone tonight. As Tammy mentioned, I work with the Diabetes Partners in Action Coalition, otherwise known as DPAC. DPAC is a statewide coalition here in Michigan that's administered by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Michigan Public Health Institute. It was funded in 1977, and it's a partnership of individuals and organizations who are actively working to inform, motivate, and activate people in Michigan who have diabetes or those who work with people living with diabetes. Our coalition works to be a change agent both locally and statewide. So as mentioned, please visit our website. It's www.dpacmi.org, so dpacmi.org, to learn more about our initiatives and our resources, and also our events and our activities. So I hope you'll all take a look at it and see if there's something there that you might want to partner with or join forces with us on. So thank you. It's also now my honor to introduce Dr. Elsholz, who graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in 1996. He trained in internal medicine and pediatrics at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital and at the University of Michigan, finishing in 2000. He completed his subspecialty training in adult and pediatric endocrinology at the University of Michigan in 2004. He's currently with Sparrow Hospital Pediatric Subspecialty Clinic in Lansing and is a clinical assistant professor for Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. So welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I will now turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to be driving myself, and I have the computer sort of up on a stack of booklets right now because it's got a lower camera. So I'm trying not to be looking down on everybody. Let me go over to the presentation now. This should be set up, and there. Is that displaying now?
It is displaying.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so what I'm talking about today is telehealth, and these have become, this has been around for years, and there's really nothing new as a concept, but recently it's become really very commonplace in a short order. And so what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the history of telehealth, not a lot that way, but discuss some of the applications that can help make your visits, your telehealth visits, more productive. And then to try and get some feedback in that this is very new to a lot of us practicing. As an endocrinologist, my first telehealth visit was done as a phone visit and began 3 weeks ago. Then my first video visits were just yesterday. So when I'm talking about this, I wanted people to understand that I'm really doing this as somebody who's sort of a fellow traveler along this road. I'm learning how to do this as a lot of other people are adapting to it. So there have been a lot of trials and tribulations along the way, and a lot of technical difficulties, but it's been worthwhile and has been really an interesting experience. So I'd like to get what we can from people's feedback at the end, what things you feel like are working for you in the diabetes community and what things really aren't. And then I also spoke with some other practitioners, both adult and pediatrics, and will include some of their experiences as well. So that's why I say I'm not qualified to speak on this topic. I'm not a particularly strong person in terms of computer technique or even in terms of video conferencing. But I'm in this and learning as I go, and I'll try and share what I've learned with you, and I hope you'll do the same for me. So when we talk about telehealth or telemedicine, what we're really talking about is this use of digital technologies to deliver medical health education or public health information. And usually we talk about telehealth as the delivery of information, medicine being, when we talk about telemedicine, usually that's more the use of these same forms of information technology to provide clinical health care. So as physicians, it's a way that we can either reach further into communities we can't normally get to geographically, or right now, every community is one that we can't get to geographically. And the span of these different interventions really covers a wide range. So, the initial telehealth was literally call somebody who knows more about this. When I started off as a fellow back at the University of Michigan in the early 2000s, I guess I really know hiding my age since they just shared my biography, but we would be on call, and you would get calls from hospitals in many different points in Michigan where they didn't have a pediatric diabetes program. And it would be from an emergency room doctor who understood diabetic ketoacidosis in adults, but didn't necessarily understand what needed to happen differently in children. And it would be, helping them diagnose, helping them make sure that the child was adequately treated, sometimes transferring, sometimes discharging, sometimes follow-up. And so that was sort of the original telehealth, was just talking to people on the telephone. And this has a wide range of efficacy in that it can be very useful for some people. And telephone visits, and we're even seeing this in telehealth, sometimes can literally be phoning it in. So it can run a broad spectrum. Telehealth then has been used in conjunction with robotics to actually do some fascinating things in stroke care. I believe it's a health system out of California when I was reading on this, and actually having a robot that can help a practitioner cover multiple hospitals over a widespread geographic area, and actually help with performing the physical examination, with getting a history from the patient, and with deciding what things needed to be done, whether they needed thrombolytic therapy, whether they needed some kind of treatment for the stroke, whether a treatment was possible or advisable. The other part is that it allows for specialized care to reach many more locations. Right now we have some practitioners who travel all over and taking plane trips and such. And when there's a larger concentration of patients, that's possible. Where there's a smaller one, it allows for a little bit further reach. When I was in residency, they had, and so again, this was back in the 1990s, there were specialized tools, and you would get a call, and the practitioner wherever would come on the screen, and they would be able to show whoever was advising them what the eardrum looked like or what the back of the eye looked like, and could do remote care and help other physicians or other practitioners take better care of their patients. Now, in diabetes, we've been actually doing this for quite a while. I feel like I'm really getting old when I keep sharing all of these back when I was training stories. I'm turning into one of those. But back when we started off, downloading meters was new. And this was the 2000s. A lot of people had the old paper logs, if you remember. They had different meter companies, and they were small, and you'd kind of write in there. And the records themselves could be really spectacular. Bits of food, blood covering it, written in all different pens and scribbled. That was really how you knew the records were good. If there wasn't some blood on them, I was always a little bit suspicious. But from an infection control standpoint, that may not have been ideal. Also practicing in pediatrics, not all the records that were written down, all ending in 0 and 5 in the same pen, were necessarily true representations of what the blood sugar had been. So we had moved to downloading meters, and this is a form of telehealth. So it's really nothing, not that new. Downloading meters, in the early days, it would involve a lot of different cords in order to download the meter. Each type of meter had its own special cord. You had almost these octopus appearing contraptions that you would have to find the right software, the right cord in order to download the particular brand of meter. And given the large number of brands of meters, that could be quite a daunting task. And now, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but now we've gotten to where we were able to follow continuous glucose monitors in real time, just looking at your phone. So it's really, those types of technologies are all part of telehealth. And it's now we're really looking at at how we can use these in the care of diabetes, and use it to extend our practices into a lot of different areas, into a lot of different populations. So meter downloads, written records are much rarer. Now it's really difficult, where those used to be the mainstay of care, coming in with the sheets. Now I have seen a few in the last few weeks, but really that's actually a pretty rare thing. And we also had the rise of pumps that were downloadable. With Medtronic and Animas, back in the older days, you were able to download and pull out the information people were putting in. So if they didn't necessarily write down how many carbohydrates they ate or what the blood sugar was, you could pull it back out of the pump and have it neatly arranged that would tell you what they ate, when they ate, what caused the blood sugar pattern, and could really start to get at some of the dosing and where you could make changes. And it's not really stopping there, because now there are companies most of the major pump companies are working on cloud-based systems that would continually download the continuous wow, my hand keeps disappearing. That will continuously download the pump and or the continuous monitor, so that there's no longer a need when you come to clinic to download the pump specifically. All you need to do is give a practitioner or give a practice your username and password, and they'll be able to pull down the information for whatever time frame they want to do. So that shortens download times and shortens some of the difficulties with this. So it's really going in quite a few places, into quite a few places. The other part technologically that's happening is a lot of the pump companies are now working on technology to analyze the blood sugars and make recommendations for what the pump, what you can do, what changes that a practitioner can make in the pump, or what changes a patient can make in their pump in order to better treat their blood sugars. So that kind of analysis is also going to really change things and is really part of the larger world of telemedicine. Now, in clinic, things have changed a bit, but really for decades, the sort of face-to-face nature of it really hasn't changed much. But a lot of this changed with the recent outbreak in COVID. At that time, within a really remarkably short time frame, many practices mobilized to start to do telehealth, to start to deliver care over the phone, and then from there over video. There has been a sharp divide, which has now, with governmental action, actually started to come down, but there was a sharp divide in what was in the coverage regarding whether it was telephone communication or whether it included video. If it included video, the reimbursement was much higher. When it was just telephone, it tended to be less. Some of that is also now with time and with recognition of the importance of trying to care for people at home before they come into a hospital or clinic and avoid any exposure. And there's been more of a premium on that in a relatively short period of time. So some of the barriers to telehealth, because there's so many things about this that are really wonderfully convenient. To be able to sit, in your own house and have a visit with your doctor in the right clinical situation is a wonderful bit of technology. Well, one of the biggest barriers has always been insurance reimbursement. Telephone services have not been reimbursed traditionally, which in pediatric diabetes has really been a difficulty in that there's so much that's done over the phone, reviewing blood sugars, recommending changes, particularly when children are newly diagnosed. However, that part had not been covered prior to this. The video communication as well hadn't been covered, but that started to change. Interestingly now, one of the difficulties is with this move towards telehealth. Some insurance companies have moved to add co-pays onto telehealth. And on one of the web groups that I participate in with endocrinologists, one of the barriers has been that from a patient standpoint, it's been the full copay that they would pay for a clinic visit, but the hemoglobin A1C wouldn't be measured if they did it at home. And that was a disincentive for some people, feeling that adjusting the blood sugar wasn't as helpful as being able to get that signpost of a hemoglobin A1C to know where they were at and how they're doing. Another big barrier is the cost of equipment. I mean, most of us have cell phones, tablets, or a laptop, but they are not cheap. And the technology to do this, just to have the hardware that you need in order to do this is expensive. And even if you have a laptop, it may or may not be able to handle video. So you need to have a separate microphone. Most laptops now come with a microphone and a camera built in, but many desktops don't, and you need a separate webcam or a headset or a microphone or something, and that's just more hardware to bring to try and find the drivers to install it, more things to go wrong. Internet access itself is also an issue. You can have a lot of variability in the speed of your connection. For this talk tonight, I have three children who are all using the internet off and on, one for college, two for their one for high school classes, one for middle school. And the worry of there being slowdown and multiple people using it. While we were talking about this, you have to sort of portion out who is doing what and hope that 3 people aren't all trying to use Netflix while I'm trying to present this. So those are very real problems in what your internet speed is. You can use phones for it, but data plans also can be, in utilizing video, it uses a lot of data. And depending on your data plan, that can be very expensive and can be another big issue. One that we ran headlong into right at the beginning of the COVID outbreak was HIPAA. If you're not familiar with HIPAA, it's the Health Insurance, Privacy and Accountability Act. And there are a lot of stipulations in HIPAA about the security, the level of security that's needed for any communications regarding medical care. And by and large, that's a very good thing. But in dealing with trying to mobilize a large number of people to use video for diabetes care, it really presented a difficulty in that a lot of the platforms were clogged, and some of the more readily accessible platforms such as FaceTime or Skype were not secure to the level that HIPAA required. Some of those requirements have been relaxed with time to try and allow for provider and patient communication. Institutional firewalls too, from a security standpoint, have been interesting in preparing for this talk. I'd gotten an email from JDRF, and when the email was for a work email, but when you tried to route the Zoom conference over the institutional firewall, we had a lot of difficulties, and we've run into a lot of difficulties that way. When I work at Sparrow Hospital, trying to keep the conferences running, and with having difficulties with incompatibility of different things we're using, and trying to bring this all to people who are completely inexperienced users, fumbling their way blindly. We had a lot of difficulties, and we've run into a lot of difficulties that way. So another issue that comes up is platforms for devices, whether or not you have a compatible whether or not you have a compatible platform, Android versus iPhone, Apple or iOS versus or Apple operating system versus Windows can create difficulties. And there are a lot of different platforms for meeting. I have a few of those down there, but there are a ton of them. We're using Zoom, we've used WebEx, and I've already had the experience of sitting on WebEx waiting for a meeting and finding out it was really supposed to be on Zoom. So there are enough different ones, and each practice, often through the electronic medical record, may have a different type of meeting platform that they utilize. So the download, the underlying portion in all this is a lot of things have to go right for this to work. And they don't always. There are delays, there's feedback, there's dual audio. As I was speaking a moment ago, I could hear what I had said about 5 seconds earlier coming back at me. All of these things make telehealth a little more difficult, but overall still worth it. Now, I wanted to talk about a few telehealth applications that can really be helpful with respect to helping you personally, but also helping you present your diabetes information to your diabetes care providers, and in an ordered fashion that will really help. And some of these are very common and most people know about them, and some of them are a little more uncommon. So I wanted to start with Medtronic. They'll download any type of Medtronic pump, as well as a limited number of meters that's changed over the years for which meters it will. So if you're using a different meter, it'll try and integrate those two things, and does a reasonably good job of it. It's good software, but if there's a time difference between the meter and the pump and you're downloading the meter separately, you'll often end up getting a blood sugar listed twice. which is great for the number of times per day that you're checking. But when it's all the same and it's an hour apart, it's usually pretty easy to spot that there's a problem. Now here, and this is not meant to be exhaustive, but to give, when we get into this issue again of supported platforms. So CareLink, this is off of their website, will work with some versions of Windows, but won't work with others. Some versions of Mac OS and not with others. So if you may have a computer, you may have the hardware, but if it's not the right hardware, that can be an issue. T-Connect is another one that works very well. This is for tandem pumps. And again, we'll download the pump. We'll also download the continuous monitor. Medtronics will download their continuous monitor as well, not to short them. And T-Connect will let you kind of integrate with their dosing along with their continuous glucose monitoring. And again, system requirements for this. So it's some of the more modern versions of Mac software and Windows, but if you have an older computer, you may have trouble running it. You need to have the appropriate browser in order to download, and all of those things can provide barriers and provide difficulties. Now, one of the newer ones, this is Gluco. Gluco joined with Diasend. And so when I'm talking about Gluco, I'm actually including Diasend as the two companies have now merged. They have something out now where they'll help you download, and according to their website, they'll download about 95% of different devices. The single thing that we use this most for in our clinic is to download the Omnipod. So this will pull down the dosing information. It will pull down CGMS and allows you to get an integrated report that will tell you how much bolus insulin, how much basal insulin, how the bolusing is going, what the total daily dose of insulin is, what the blood sugars are, and what the CGMS pattern has been. And here's a little bit about the compatibility options with Gluco. There's another one that's newer. I'm not as familiar with this. We've used Gluco and Diasend in our clinic for several years, but there's also Tidepool. And this is a group that's sponsored by JDRF, so I figured it would be important to include that. And it is a free application and can help with downloading, again, multiple different pumps and meters. And Tidepool, from a business standpoint, is really trying to help integrate CGMs from different manufacturers, pumps from different manufacturers, and have sort of an intraoperable diabetes system in place. So this is just an example of one page. There are many more supported devices from Tidepool, but this is just one page showing kind of a wide variety of the different meters that you'll be able to download there. So when you're engaging in telehealth, one of the most helpful things from a diabetes standpoint that you can do is to be able to download your information beforehand. And either send it in, which is an additional barrier, in that most email systems over EMRs, or at least the most popular one, won't let you put attachments. And it's for very good security reasons. Unfortunately, you can't email blood sugars. Many hospital systems, mine amongst them, won't allow you to use open email. You need to use the email through the electronic medical record, but somebody can't put an attachment. So these provide a third-party website that you can go to securely, and your provider can go to securely and be able to pull up your information. And it really makes the visits a good bit more productive. So I wanted to then talk a little bit about about a few different provider impressions. I've gotten a lot of information and a lot of sort of feedback about how it's going from a web group of endocrinologists that I participate in, but I asked a few people kind of in depth what they thought. So this is adult doc number one, because we have to maintain anonymity. He had used a platform done through Doximity or Doxy, and had also used at various times FaceTime, Skype, Epic, had really used a wide variety. He should probably be doing this talk, but he did a different one. and had used WebEx. Of all of them, he had really preferred Doxy, felt that it was easiest from both a provider standpoint and from a patient standpoint. It was an app on the phone that was easy to access and technologically was easy to use. The foot exam was an adventure. He had, and as an adult doctor, he was trying to do a foot examination, just looking for any deformities, any ulcerations, anything like that. But during the process of trying to do that, he said he got multiple pictures of ceilings and floors. And being sort of an experiential learner myself, I was trying to take a good selfie of my foot. And it turns out that is remarkably difficult. Trying to get a good focus, you need a lot of dexterity to get your foot into a position where you can photograph it or move your phone and get a good selfie of your foot. Now, not recommending that you try it, but I mean, we've all got a lot of time right now. So overall though, when you kind of asked bottom line, what was the experience? He had felt that it was good and was really hopeful that it would stay, particularly for a lot of our patients who travel long distances. The next one, and I wrote down this quote because I liked it so much, was that it often works out, but boy, we have a lot of connection difficulties. And that is definitely an issue that I've seen and other people have seen. He's using an application called UpDocs, and said that has worked well. He did feel that if the pump and glucose data weren't uploaded separately, that the visit wasn't as effective when you were speaking about blood sugars sort of qualitatively instead of being able to look quantitatively at the numbers. But he also had felt it would be prominent. And the third one, who's a pediatric endocrinologist from Lansing who will remain nameless, really had only done telephone visits until a day ago. And the telephone visits actually worked well when data was downloaded. But the first 4 audio visual sort of through Zoom were unmitigated disasters, which he navigated with an extremely awkward, in an extremely awkward fashion. But did work out and had a few more visits today that were a little bit smoother. So he's feeling relatively hopeful. Now, I'd like to hear from some people, and I have to figure out as part of this learning curve what some people's experiences were. Do I need to stop?
Dr. Elsels, I will help you.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second and I will moderate for you. And
Thank
actually,
you.
Amy was going to join us also because there's a question in here that would be best answered maybe by her and I.
Okay.
But we'll go through these questions together.
Okay.
So, do you think we'll see more telehealth even after this COVID virus is over?
I think so. The rapid mobilization of this, and there are so many other areas right now that have mobilized rapidly, but the rapid uptake of this was really pretty remarkable. And I don't think this genie is going back in the bottle. I think there are a lot of things about it that are good, and there are a lot of things about it that need work. But the short answer to the question is no, I don't think it's going away. And particularly, I think that from a provider standpoint, that, we tend to be sort of conservative people in terms of what we do, and just being pushed off the cliff and into the cold water and learning to use it and that it wasn't so bad. I think there'll be much less provider resistance. I just don't know from an insurance standpoint if they'll kind of go back to being more resistant. But I think the provider stance on this will change significantly because, we've gone through this and have learned to use it and gotten at least some level of bumbling awkwardness with it.
Yeah, and I just want to put a note out there. I noticed that some of our attendees have raised their hand. If you could put your question in the Q&A area, we'd be happy to field that for you. one person wrote that they would think that this kind of care would be great for our schools that don't have nurses. Do you think that would work in that type of arena?
It can. I mean, certainly we're already doing that from the standpoint of telephone calls. The nurses in our clinic can tell you all sorts of stories about being called that way. But for some things like that, having that integrated now into the electronic medical record system to teach school personnel, that'll be really, really useful. And this year there may even be a premium. We had a lot of people who at the Beaumont folks had sponsored the school personnel seminar as part of the JDRF summit. And with some resources like that not being available now, this may well be able to fill a gap there and at least help from an education standpoint.
And how are endos getting blood work done, such as A1C during the lockdown? They know that there's a lot of A1C home test kits, but they're pretty pricey.
Yeah. Typically what I've been doing is either just saying, you know what, right now, I'm happy to put in the order if you want the A1C. I would look at the data right now and would not have you go to a lab, at least until things feel a little bit safer. And it's been, an unfortunate consequence, feeling like even coming into my office wasn't a safe place. But for sending to the lab, those options are available in terms of being able to use A1C now or one of the other home kits. But usually I would just put an order in or, schedule another visit maybe in 6 weeks to get the A1C at that point.
And I'm going to actually field this one. Amy has joined our little panel here. And Amy, there's one question in there really for you and for JDRF. Are there any efforts being made by DPAC or JDRF and other entities to ensure that insurance and Medicaid continues to cover telehealth visits for diabetics beyond the current pandemic stay-at-home orders?
So the one thought I had about that question was, while DPAC is not integrated, I would say, into Medicaid, the diabetes section at Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is revising their diabetes strategic plan or their diabetes improvement plan for the state of Michigan. And DPAC, as well as some of our member organizations and some of our champions, were on key informant interviews. And so these were some items that did come up through those. And those were even done prior to COVID-19, and the telehealth did come up on that. So that is something that was put forward to the diabetes section at MDHHS as a gap area and an area that we wanted to make sure that we could address. And then in addition, we utilize our advocacy partners, so JDRF, American Diabetes Association, and National Kidney Foundation, and they do a lot of our advocacy work and some of our outreach work towards the Medicaid folks as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Doctor, can you share some pointers on how to prepare for a telemedicine appointment to make best use of your time?
Well, and I should also say, if you go to Google on YouTube, there is it's through JDRF, somebody a young gentleman, and it's a recent video talking about some of the big tips. So these are really kind of stolen straight from him. He does a tremendous job with it, and it's worth looking up. But one was to download your information beforehand. That really, having that data there in a format that can be looked at and that you can kind of discuss. And if you can, for both of you to have that data. So, I've had several patients who, when they downloaded it, printed a copy at home for their pump report. And then you can go and say, hey, looking at this, I'm seeing a lot of high blood sugars between 9 a.m. and noon. And, usually for school, we had a lower basal rate during that time. Now, without being at school or having a carb ratio that was a little bit weaker in the sort of mid-afternoon, now we need to strengthen that, because what used to be lunch is now breakfast, and we're seeing highs. But being able to both look at the data and point it out is really helpful. Knowing what medication refills, that's always a good idea. but in particular for these visits, some of the interface with running the telehealth application and going back and forth with the EMR can be really touchy on occasion. So knowing what it is you need will let your provider kind of write that down, and then later either do a refill on something and kind of knowing what you want to get out of it that way.
I'm going to, just one second, I'm going to bring someone into the conversation. If you hear me, Elizabeth Caswell, I said it so you can talk. But you probably have to unmute.
Did I get unmuted?
Yeah, you got unmuted. I saw what you shared in the panel, so I saw that you, Elizabeth, by the way, is one of our board members. She's also a national speaker for JDRF, but apparently with her kids, she's had an experience with telehealth already, and I wanted you to share it.
Oh, sure. You know, I called in once I realized that the idea of a clinic visit was not really feasible. And we are seen at Michigan Medicine, and we were very quickly in pediatric endocrinology. We were very quickly scheduled for a telehealth visit. We got a series of instructions about how to make sure we could access their health portal. I don't know whether it's Epic or not, but how we could access that. I already had access to that, so that made it a little easier. And then very specific instructions about how they wanted data uploaded, and getting ready for the appointment. And it actually included milestones by time, like 1 week before you should do this, 2 days before you should make sure you do this. And then on the day of the appointment, we were told to sign in about 10 or 15 minutes early so that we would be waiting for the care provider. He came on immediately, on time. And it was first, it was nice to still have that face-to-face contact, the friendly aspect of working with a pediatric endocrinologist who you've known for years, and doing all the sort of social greetings and interactions that make you feel like you're really cared for. And then, he was able to look at numbers. It was a really good piece of advice that the presenter gave of having a copy of your numbers next to you, or having another device on which to look at them at, because my son was able to look at the patterns interactively with his physician. And then some changes were recommended and discussed, and they were made real time in his pump. And then after the visit was over, we got like a visit report that reflected all the changes that were made and such. I guess that was also entered into the health portal. And as the presenter mentioned, we just have the lab orders waiting for us for when there's a time that it's safer for my son to go get its tests. But we were able to use the glucose management index, which is an approximation of A1C that's a part of the Dexcom G6. And we felt like there was good progress being made since the last visit that we had in clinic. So all of those things were touched on, and it was very efficient. In fact, my son said, well, it took a lot less time than going into the clinic, so maybe we should do it this way every time.
Yeah.
And just because when you're in clinic, there's a lot of waiting in between, and you of course are often seen by an entire team. And if one person on a team is seeing someone else, and you get a little asynchronous, so it does take longer. But this was very efficient and not rushed either.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you. I did also want to share from Angela. She mentioned that she works in a diabetes learning center where many patients don't want to come into the office even when stay-at-home orders are lifted. She has been in meetings with passwords via password-protected Zoom meetings. She's hoping that she can keep seeing patients who really benefit from education, but she's concerned that insurance won't want to continue covering virtual benefits. And she'd like organizations like ours to come together to push for coverage. And what I'll say to that, Angela, I don't right now know exactly what we're doing in terms of advocacy, but I will definitely check with our advocacy person and look into that for you. I can tell you that as JDRF sees needs like that, that is the type of thing that we push for. When insurance companies have been telling you what specific type of monitor that they will cover and they won't cover others, we jump in with advocacy to help solve that problem. And this seems like one that we would help, but I'll look into it more for you. I do have all the questions for after, and I'll check that out and see if I can get a better answer that I can respond to later. So how do you integrate needing to see additional healthcare people at the same visit, like a dietitian or a social worker?
So at least, and this isn't an experience that we've had yet, although our dietitians actually have their own appointments. So that you can have the dietitian also make an appointment. It may be that you do like one with the provider at 1 o'clock and with the dietitian at 1:30, with the nurse or with the psychologist, depending on who is in your treatment team, and just making different appointments. They can be kind of scheduled back to back for convenience, but it is a little bit less efficient in that, depending on how the clinic is organized, if one finishes early, the next may or may not be able to go early. But a lot of those things exist in a physical clinic too.
We're also being asked, are the A1C home test kits reliable to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, they are. And it's more the expense associated with them, but they're reasonable. For patients on CGM, in particular, I'm actually kind of moving. A1C is still important, but really looking at the time in range is a more pertinent measure. So for my patients who are on continuous monitors, a large percentage of the time, I rely a little bit more on the time in range than on the A1C alone, but that's kind of, I'm getting a bit of field with my answer, my apologies. But the A1C kits, A1C now, are reasonably accurate, yes.
And I'm going to bring someone else in here. There's another doctor in the room. Dr. Maltz, I have opened up your microphone. If you unmute yourself, well, I can unmute you.
You were supposed to be my partner in crime on a different one.
Yeah. Dr. Maltz, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
I just managed to unmute. Hello.
Hi. So
Hi, Dan.
You've
Hi
been
there.
using Doxy for 3 weeks.
So we still got to do something together this year then.
Yes, I had to just jump in and say, very nice review. I've been using DoxyMe for almost 4 weeks of virtual appointments. And I have to agree with you, having that uploaded or even called in, if somebody has a meter and doesn't have a sensor or a pump or doesn't have a way to upload their numbers, calling in a week or two of blood sugars to have that available to look at makes the appointments much more effective. I also find that the kids, when I'm on appointments with the child and the parent, they seem, even though the children in our community are very functional and flexible with technology, they all seem to be somewhat reluctant to participate in video meetings. I think they're expecting their peers to be on the other side of Snapchat or Instagram, and they're a little put off by seeing an adult person on the other side. I don't know if you had that experience today.
You're too old to be on the screen.
Exactly.
Probably some truth with that.
I don't think that video visits are going to replace having to see patients at all in the office, as much as I agree with Elizabeth and her son that there are things about them that are much more efficient. We can't check injection sites. We can't evaluate thyroid for goiters. The adult providers can't check feet or even blood pressure very easily. So I'm hoping if I have a say in the way the world goes, which I have no thought that I do, that we'll end up with a hybrid version of the way we used to do diabetes management, the way we're doing it now, into something that provides both some in-person appointments and the opportunity to do some video or telemedicine appointments, so that things can be more flexible, but also provide that full around evaluation you can't really get on a video visit.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Moltz. I'm going to mute you again because I'm going to finish up with one other person and then we have to go on to our next part. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
So Rosalind had noted that it feels limited to her since her blood pressure monitor is not really accurate or professional. And there's no visual of the nerves in her feet, like you've mentioned. So she feels like it's a partial exam.
And I think it is. I actually agree with that assessment completely. You know, right now in a situation like this, it's the best that you can do, but I don't think it will replace face-to-face medicine for that reason. And you know, from where I would envision being able to use this would be, you know, several days when you have particularly bad weather, that you would be able to, you know, okay, call somebody up. Look, I don't want you making the trip. I have patients who travel from sort of upper mid Michigan quite a bit. And, you know, to be able to say, you know what, for today, let's do this over the telehealth visit, but I want to bring you in, you know, a little bit sooner, maybe in 6 weeks or something. Or, you know, if there's some other reason for it. So I think it works well in a pinch, but I completely agree. There's, particularly in pediatrics, the other issue is like growth, what's happening with height, what's happening with weight, which is a big issue for in type 2 diabetes, but still an issue in type 1 diabetes. All of those things, you know, can't really be assessed effectively in just a visit, just a clinical visit, but it can kind of stopgap and keep things going until it's safe for us to do things the old way.
Well, Dr. Ellis, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience. It's all new things for everybody. This is all new for us. Telehealth visits are new for you. We're all going to be experts soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. If it doesn't do us in first.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here.
Right.
We really appreciate it. Have a good night.
And thank you to everybody.
All right. And pretty soon we're going to bring up our third set of speakers, but I've got a few things that I'm going to talk about first. It would help if I use the right mouse. I have these two computers here and I have two mouses, two computers, two everything, and it's making it very interesting. So I wanted to just go over a little bit of housekeeping for those of you that have joined us that weren't on at the beginning of the last talk. Welcome. For those of you that have been sticking with us through both talks, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to go over a little bit of housekeeping. You are muted and your video is off because with a lot of people on a call, it does make it difficult. So we just have our speakers on the call. And then you're going to notice behind me, I'm coming to you from Detroit. So I decided to put a Detroit picture instead of the JDRF picture. This is a bridge, the Ambassador Bridge that I can see out my window. And so I wanted to let you know where I was because we're all coming from somewhere different tonight. You can swap your views with this swap presentation view. It's in the upper right. And if you play with it, you can see the speakers in different ways. You can see them larger. You can see all of them. You can see them like they look like the Brady Bunch if you do it in a certain way. So play with that. You can't break it. And then we want you to engage with us. Even though we have your sound turned off and your video turned off, it doesn't mean you can't talk to us. Just like we were talking just now with Dr. Ellis, and I brought a couple of other people in, they were putting chat stuff like just experiences and talking to the other presenters. in the chat box, and you definitely want your chat box open, because that is where you're going to see Crystal putting some really great resources. For example, one of the resources she's going to be putting in there is the forward activity page for your kids. They just created this great page with coloring and puzzles and things on the new forward activity page, and she just posted it out there for you, the link. Thank you to Ford for that. And she's going to be putting some other links out there as well. So make sure you have your chat open. And then also the Q&A, and these are at the bottom of your screen. If you hover your mouse there, you'll see it. And Q&A is the way that you can ask questions of the panelists. You don't want to ask the questions in the webinar chat because they're not watching that. They're watching the Q&A area. So don't raise your hand. You know, I know there's a way to raise your hand in there, but we don't put people on from a raised hand. We put it on from things being in the Q&A. So put your questions in there, and be social with us. As you're on here tonight, take a picture of your screen, although not when I'm on it, and post it to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you're using. I know there's a lot more out there. I still haven't figured out Twitter, probably never will. But use our hashtags, Type 1 Nation, Stronger Together, and JDRF when you're doing that. And we're streaming live on YouTube. We've been streaming since 5 o'clock. We're streaming live. Crystal will put the YouTube link in there so you can put it on social media and ask people to join, because we're about to have a great insurance panel come up in just a minute that your friends may want to pay attention to, your friends and family. And then, of course, at this time, we want to say thank you to our healthcare heroes, all those people on the front lines in the hospitals, and even all the people behind the scenes in the hospital, making the hospitals run, taking care of all of the patients with COVID-19 and all the patients in general. Even our firemen and police and the people working the gas stations and the grocery stores, the really important things, keeping them going so that we can stay safe at home. We want to say thank you to them. And we want to thank Lily. Lily is our Summit National Premier sponsor, and they are also our JDRF One Walk sponsor nationally. And they're doing a lot to meet the needs of people living with diabetes during the COVID-19 crisis and every day. They have a financial system program that is one of several options that can be assessed through the Lilly Diabetes Solution Center. So thank you so much to Lilly. They're a great supporter of JDRF. Register for the One Walk. It's coming up this fall, and I'm really hopeful we're all going to be together, that it's one that we're going to be able to do live and in person. But it's time to register. Crystal, Sarah, Jillian, me, April will all tell you time to get your team in there. Go to walk.jdrf.org and register to walk with us. So right now we can't be in person with you, and like with the summit, we turned it to a virtual event. We're doing the same thing with our gala because at least right now through June 30th, we're not going to do anything in person, but we're still going to come to you virtually, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're thankful of Ford, our presenting sponsor. They're going virtual right along with us. Ford has been a great sponsor of ours for many, many years in the Type 1 community. But on June 4th, we're going to be online having a lot of fun and a really good silent auction that you're going to be able to bid for things right online, right from home. We even have some live auction things that are pretty impressive. So we want you to join us. We're going to have fun. Anybody is welcome to join us. There's no cost to come to it this year with it being virtual. So we'd love to see you. We'd really love to see you there. And Dr. Kowalski has something to say to Ford and its employees.
How do we even begin to say thank you? Your support at Ford is making it so much better for me, Edsel Ford's son, and the more than 1.6 million people with type 1 diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There's no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact each of you is having, and know that together we will cure. There's no way.
And we also want to thank our volunteers. This is National Volunteer Week. Perfect week to be here with you all. But this week and every week, every day, we are thankful for our volunteers. They are the reason that we can do what we do. And what we say here at JDRF is together we are stronger. We're stronger together. We're so thankful for them. This is all of our staff here and some kids and their dogs saying thank you to you today and every day. While volunteers are key to our fundraising efforts, but with many of JDRF's biggest spring fundraising events canceled or postponed, future research is in jeopardy. In order to meet this challenge, we are asking our supporters who are able to contribute to our Fund to Cure program. Fund to Cure provides JDRF with the dollars needed to move therapies and technologies out of the lab and into the waiting hands of the T1D community. 100% of your Fund to Cure contribution goes directly to our mission and is fully tax deductible. Although these are uncertain times, when so many things seem beyond our control, one thing we can control and take pride in is ensuring JDRF's mission to cure type 1 diabetes. Our youth ambassador, Kendall, would like to tell you how your donations have helped her live a healthier and more robust life.
Hi, my name is Kendall Chamberlain and I have T1D. Thanks to donations to JDRF from people like you, I am able to be more independent. I participate in many school activities. I also perform in dance. Since I was diagnosed at 7, my treatment has gotten easier to manage. I'm now using CGM to monitor my sugar and an insulin pump that delivers insulin throughout the day. Your continued support means that our lives will only get easier. Thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm going to ask our next panelists to show themselves and turn their audio on. Dr. Humayun, Emily and Jacinta. Come on and join us.
Hello.
Hi.
It says, cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Well, there you go. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to get you all available. Jacinta, make co-host. Emily, make co-host. Okay. Jacinta, make co-host. All right, you should all be able to join me now. Give me 1 second here. All right. Wow, this is totally live sometimes, you know? Totally live. Okay. I just have to laugh because if I don't laugh, you know. Okay. So
hey, we all gotta have some fun.
Here we go. I got it. I'm good. So we're about to start our panel on taking action and understanding the insurance maze. We've got Dr. Jeff Humayun.
Doctor.
Isn't it? Oh, it's not Dr. Somehow I have it in mind as
Whoa,
doctor.
wait a minute.
Okay. I gave you a new degree.
That's a lot of pressure.
Well, Jeff has over 20 years of experience and expertise in the diabetes supply business with a passion for always helping those with T1D get the technology and tools they need to kick diabetes in the booty. And then we have Emily Weatherup. Emily is the program director for Michigan Medicine's Adult Diabetes Education Program. She lives with type 1 diabetes and is passionate about using her skills as a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator to help all people with diabetes. And Jacinta Florek is one of 3 clinical social workers with the pediatric diabetes team in the Department of Pediatric Endocrinology at the University of Michigan C.S. Motts Children's Hospital. She earned both her master's in social work and public health from U of M in 2018 and has been with the pediatric diabetes team since 2010. She and her team are passionate advocates for patients and families living with T1D and are honored to share in their patients' T1D journeys. So I'm gonna leave it to all of you now. I'm gonna turn off my video and let you guys have some fun. The Q&A box, we've been noticing it starts filling as we go along. I'll clear out the previous questions and then you guys can check it every so often. And at the end, I'll come in and if there's any left, I'll ask them of you. Okay?
Fantastic, thanks.
Great, thank you.
All right, I think I'm going to take the lead here for the first 5-7 minutes, and then I'm going to try my best. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not real good with brevity, and many of you that have seen me before at the Type 1 Summit in person, you probably know me as the guy at the end who gives away the iPad. That's kind of my claim to fame. We're not giving away an iPad tonight, but maybe we'll have a couple tricks up our sleeve. My name is Jeff Homayan. I work for a company called Healthy Living Medical Supply here in Detroit, Michigan. We are a local diabetes supply company in what's called a DME. We'll learn about that in just a minute. We're truly dedicated to those with type 1, and that's where my passion comes into play. I've been doing this for 20 years. I get a lot of people who ask me all the time, why are you so passionate about this? And I have to be honest with you, it kind of goes back to having a lot of different jobs. And somewhere around 20 years ago, I found this industry and finally found something that I loved and that I could actually get paid to help people. And from that point on, I never looked back and never wanted to go anywhere back. So I love what I do. I really enjoy helping people, helping those with type 1 especially. And that's why I'm here tonight, and that's why I'm dedicated to do what I do. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is that how this is a little bittersweet for me. I must be honest, I've sat on the planning committee for the JDRF Type 1 Summit here in Detroit for about 10 years, maybe 11. And the summit is literally the best day of the year of my life. I love the summit. I live for that day. I help Denise plan it and arrange it, and we do a ton of fun stuff. So when I heard it was going to be canceled, I was a little bit disappointed, but I'm so happy and so glad that we were able to put this together for you. My experience is real world. I try to learn as much as I can about, I'm not a doctor. I try to learn as much as I can about the insurances, the other things that I can be an expert on and to help you. And this situation, this topic, this understanding the maze of diabetes that we're going to talk about tonight is exactly how I can help. So I pulled together as much information as I could that I think you'll be interested in, and then we'll bring in our panel and we'll talk about some more too. As I go forward, you'll see that I will have my email listed on each of the slides. So feel free to email me anytime, preferably not tonight while we're going, but if that's what you have to do, about any of the topics that we're going to talk about, any questions, anything you're interested in, be happy to either help you directly or guide you to the right place. So, oh, and the other thing is, I have to thank the JDRF. I'm so appreciative of allowing me to do this and take a shower for the first time in 3 weeks. No, I kid. Not 3 weeks, maybe 3 days. Obviously, I haven't shaved, and unfortunately, I'm not going to shave because my wife actually thinks she's married to another guy right now. So she would like me to keep this. So, so I'm going to go forward with I'm going to switch to the screen share. All right. So there we are, understanding the insurance maze. I entitled this Your Ultimate Weapon and Advocacy Arsenal. Like I said, my name is Jeff Humayan. I work for a company called Healthy Living Medical Supply here in Detroit, Michigan. Here's your first insider insight. This is one of the things that I love to share, things that you may not know, you might want to know, things that people are probably in the industry only know. What is DME? We're going to talk a lot about DME. That is the part of your insurance that generally pays for your diabetes supplies. It stands for durable medical equipment. It also the same insurance that pays for oxygen, prosthetics, those types of things. And I got to be totally honest with you. One of the things I hear about all the time is because there's so many people with diabetes, people think, oh, there's so much money. You guys are making so much money. Everybody wants to do this. No, there really isn't. Over the past 10 years, more so than the past 20, but definitely the past 10, maybe 5, reimbursements keep getting cut and cut and cut and cut in some ways so low that there's certain products and supplies we can't even supply because the reimbursement rates have gone down that much. What we do to make money and stay in business is, again, a dedication to service. We're there for you to keep your disease in check and to give you the tools and technology to do that. So one of the ways that we can make money is by providing a good service, and the longer you stay with us, the more we can make money and stay in business. And that's what we do at Healthy Living. There's many other companies that do what we do. Obviously, I'm a little biased because of our dedication to diabetes and being local here in Michigan. But just one little myth buster for you. Before I even get going too far, I wanted to give you guys a brief history on health insurance, how we got to this place. Way back in the early 1900s, networks were established. First by hospitals, that was what was called Blue Cross, and then by physician practices who wanted to keep up, that was called Blue Shield. Those entities started offering insurance plans or some form of an insurance plan to their members or employees or patients. How did we get to employer-based coverage? It's actually kind of weird. During World War II, there were wage controls set that didn't allow businesses to pay people or give them raises. So companies had to think outside the box and get creative with trying to give an incentive to employees to either come to work there or to actually stay there. One of those incentives was to provide them with some sort of health coverage. And that's, whether it's good or bad in this society today, that's how we came about with the employer-based health coverage. For those of you outside Michigan, I'm sorry you're going to hear me talk about this quite a bit tonight, but it's where Michigan is completely different than every other state in the union. There might be Texas, Florida, Ohio, or other heavily DME states, but Michigan is definitely the highest use of DME state in the country. This was generated basically back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s with union contracts that were negotiated mostly with our big 3 automotive companies. And there are a couple of DME providers here in the Michigan area where the contracts basically stated that these things had to fall under durable medical equipment, and diabetes supplies was one of those. One of the other things that changed recently was the implementation of competitive bidding. This was on a national scale. Medicare moved to this back in 2004, 2005. It was under President Bush. When they passed the prescription coverage for Medicare, they had to figure out a way to pay for it. So they put through this thing called competitive bidding, where every single line item in the DME world was going to have to be bid upon by companies to be able to service that. Those of us in the diabetes industry at that time thought this was going to be a giant cluster, and we kept our fingers crossed, hoping that this would not ever come to fruition and was going to be eliminated before it even came to play. Unfortunately, that got delayed and got delayed and got delayed until about 2012, when Obamacare was came out, and the Congress passed through the competitive bidding. And what you've seen is a severe reduction in reimbursement rates and a severe reduction in, increase of like criteria, what people can get. I think Tammy actually talked about it in the last one. If the last session, if you guys were on, she mentioned something about certain insurances only paying for certain things. That's usually because the reimbursement rate that we're getting paid as a company is actually lower than the cost of the product that we're paying for.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Your video has gone off?
My video has gone off.
Like of you personally? Yeah, turn your video on.
Oh.
Your thing is showing, but your video of you isn't. So they can't see you as you're talking.
You know what? Because I'm controlling it from an iPhone, I think it's going to.
Okay, got it. That's fine then.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay. Last but not least, the other thing that happened recently, I can't remember when this happened, probably 5-7 years ago, but there used to be a program. It was the Blue Cross card and Blue Cross reciprocity. What basically that was is if we were here in Michigan and we wanted to bill Blue Cross and we had a Blue Cross contract, it didn't matter where you were, what Blue Cross you had, we could bill through the Blue Cross of Michigan because that's where our contract was. And somewhere down the road, Blue Cross of Nebraska, if that's what you had, reimbursed Blue Cross of Michigan for the coverage, and they evened that out on the back end. Well, what we noticed was, and we kind of, people that I was working with at the time, we all looked at it and said, oh, this is going to be something that's going to be canceled. And sure enough, a couple of years ago, it was. The state of California was paying $6,000 for an insulin pump, and the state of Michigan was paying $4,000 for an insulin pump. That could be because of many different reasons, cost of living, who knows. But at some point, these states that had a lower reimbursement cost, at the end of the year, they're looking at their spreadsheets and they're like, why are we paying, more and more $6,000 for an insulin pump when they're, our cost is, or our reimbursement rate is only $4,000. So what they did is they removed that reciprocity, and now the rule that we have to follow, or the rule that you need to know, is that you can, if you have a Blue Cross policy, you can only be serviced by a provider in the state in which you reside. There are some grandfathered cases, some large national mail order companies that may have Blue Cross contracts in different states that they have been grandfathered in, or some of the manufacturers have grandfathered Blue Cross contracts. But generally speaking, if somebody came to me from Ohio right now and wanted service and they had Blue Cross, we could not service them because we're in the state of Michigan, and that patient has to live in Michigan for us to service them with Blue Cross. That was a pretty major change because really the only thing that you can service nationwide with a contract is Medicare and maybe a few others. All right, here's another insider insight. The importance of brick and mortar. This kind of goes along with that, that topic, but really follows most Medicaid plans, definitely follow this rule. Many insurance plans have brick and mortar rules in place for medical providers. Simply stated, this means that the provider actually must have a physical location in the state in which they serve those patients. So the biggest question that I get asked all the time is somebody that's like on an insulin pump or on a CGM and says, well, why can't I just get my insulin pump or pump supplies or my CGM supplies from the manufacturer? Why does there have to be a middleman? I don't understand. Well, sometimes that is the case. You can do that. But more often than not, you can imagine those companies would have to get a contract in every single state to be able to do that. That's why they rely on us as a distributor, because we have those local contracts And they partner with us to be able to provide in those states. Like I said, most Medicaid plans, especially here in Michigan, all the Medicaid plans follow this rule. You have to have a location in the state of Michigan to be able to provide for those patients. And I'm one of those people, I like to tell you guys real world stories. I just got an email today from a patient that I can't stand giving them this answer, but it's a patient with United Healthcare. United Healthcare has an exclusive agreement with both Edge Park and Byram, two of the largest, well, actually the two largest durable medical equipment providers in the country. Both of them do full service DME, not just diabetes supplies. And the family has Children's Special Healthcare Services, which is a fee-for-service secondary that picks up copays and deductibles for that their primary doesn't. Well, there's not a provider in the state of Michigan that can do United Healthcare as a primary. So here this family is, they can either go to Edge Park and get their supplies, but have their full, they have to pay their copays and deductibles that normally would be picked up, or just get rid of their Children's Special Healthcare because it's not doing them any good. Those are the types of things that we face all day, all the time, and try to make more simple for you guys to understand. I hate that one, it drives me crazy. We'll talk about advocacy a little bit later. All right. It's a little crazy. You guys think it's Halloween, right? Actually feels a lot more like Groundhog Day, right? But when I started getting into this, I started thinking about all the different scary topics and the scary terms that are thrown out there that people have trouble understanding. So I went with a Halloween theme, and we're just going to talk about some of the things that you might want a better explanation of. Some common terms in our world: deductibles. That is the amount of money you pay before any of your insurance payments kick in. You might have a $1,000 deductible, you might have a $2,000 deductible, you might have a $5,000 deductible. I've seen people with $10,000 deductibles, $14,000 deductibles. Those have continued to go up as the last 20 years. I remember early on in this business making calls to patients and telling them they had a $500 deductible and cringing because I didn't want to hear their sadness on the other end of the phone. Nowadays, $500 deductible is like, that's gold insurance. If you've got that, congratulations, keep it, you're doing great. Copays or co-insurance. The difference between here is pretty simple. A copay is a set fee, like a $40 copay. Co-insurance is usually a percentage, and that's where usually in DME, once you meet your deductible, then you have copays following. So you could have a $1,000 deductible, and once that's met, you pay a 20% copay of the rest of your supplies. I forgot my sound effects here. Get you guys some scary sound effects to go along. MOOP, that's not a fancy name. It's just an acronym for maximum out of pocket. This is the total amount of money you can pay in any calendar year or a contract year. So basically, again, let's give you an example. A guy has a $1,000 deductible, 20% copay, and just for ease of math, let's go with the $2,000 maximum out of pocket. So he's going to pay that first $1,000 out of pocket, and he's going to pay 20% of the reimbursement rate for the rest of that calendar year until if and when he hits $2,000 out of pocket. Once he does that, he's 100% covered. I will tell you, I get a lot of people coming to me that I've met with to talk about pumps, to talk about CGMs, two really high cost products in the diabetes world. And they'll come to me in October, November, and December, and hey, their deductibles been met. They're so happy they want to go ahead and get a new pump or a new CGM. Great. It's awesome. 100% coverage. Who doesn't love that? I'll be honest with you. If it were me, and you know, I don't live this, I can't make those judgment calls for you, but I would rather get that out of the way at the beginning of the year, pay as much as I can, as long as I've saved up, because then I have 100% coverage for the rest of the year. I'm maximizing my insurance to the best of my ability and for the betterment of me. This really is an interesting term, warranty. I put it on here because we get this question quite a bit. Why can't I get a new insulin pump? Why can't I get a new CGM? When can I get one? The warranty period is the period of time that something is covered by the manufacturer. The problem with that is as insurance companies have reduced their reimbursement rate, and as they've put more criteria, more restrictions on what you can and what you can't get, one of the things we found is that they will not pay for something if your current product is still under warranty. That goes for a CGM. If you have a receiver that's been billed, Medicare, it's covered for 3 years. You can't get a receiver billed to Medicare for 3 years. And insulin pumps, all the insulin pumps usually have a 4-year warranty. So most of the time you're stuck with that warranty for, you're stuck with that insulin pump for 4 years until your insurance will pay for a new one 4 years later. I will give Tandem a plug right now just because they were the first company that came out with an updatable program instead of, or updates instead of upgrades. So one of the things that I thought was great is they were able to go to the FDA and get approval for their, basically what we do with our phones and iPads and things, where you can get a software update to their new software as opposed to actually going ahead and getting a whole new pump. And that kind of removes the possibility of you getting a pump in year one, them coming out with a new fancy, more higher featured pump, and still stuck with that for another 3 years before insurance pays for it. Last thing is PAs and authorizations. It's just prior authorizations and authorizations. These are required by certain insurance plans. It's a process of approval given to a DMA to provide supplies. And we're going to talk more about those in the next slide. Insider insight, another scoop for you guys.
Dr. Humayun?
PAs, yes.
Sorry, I just want to give you a couple-minute warning because time is running down, and I'd like to bring up Jacinta and Emily also.
Fantastic. I will get through this and actually move forward.
Great, thanks.
All right. So there's a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding about prior auths or just getting auths. It's often dependent on the provider that's working the file. We have to look at legal interpretation. Other companies look at legal interpretation of different rules and criteria differently. And I just wanted to kind of go over, there's a certain level of risk and fear of audits. Two of the biggest things that us as a company are always worried about are what's called extrapolation. Both Medicare and Blue Cross do what, instead of audits, well, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and skip it. It's just very difficult to go outside the box and go outside the rules. So a lot of times patients will come to us and say, well, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? We have to follow those rules to a T, or else, again, I could go into a complete rabbit hole here, but we will get really burned down the road through an audit or through the extrapolation from an audit. So sometimes I bring this up because sometimes providers will actually use this as an easy out. They'll just say, sorry, you're not covered, you don't meet the criteria, and move on. So it's good to know those things and have advocates for you, which we'll get into. Help for you, finding an advocate. The JDRF has a phenomenal website. I put it there. I will actually also try to link to it after the slideshow's over. But if you go to jdrf.org, up at the top, there's a bar. It says type T1D resources. You can actually click on insurance straight from there. But if you go to the Life with T1D and then insurance, you'll find a page that is loaded with information. JDRF has their entire website available. They have an advocacy team, networking coffee groups that you can join, Facebook groups, and obviously the summits and other places where you can get information. Your provider, finding the right provider and developing a symbiotic relationship. Usually there's a customer service team or a reorder team, and you want to find the right person who's going to go above and beyond for you. Your doctor's, insider scoop. When you're dealing with your provider, be diligent, but also be kind. I recommend keeping meticulous notes when speaking to your provider. Record your dates and times of your calls. Every provider I've ever worked for, we record our phone calls. So if you have the date and time of a call, the management can usually go back to that call and see what was said and what was actually supposed to happen. Write down the names of anybody you speak with and seek help from a manager when necessary. Last but not least, your doctor's office. Find the key person at your doctor's office. Your physician and your nurse practitioner are always great. Your CDE, which now I'm having a really hard time after 20 years being in this business, calling them CDCESs. Certified Diabetes Educator, or their new name, Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. Your medical assistant, sometimes there's a document specialist that works with the doctor getting the documents that the provider actually needs. And sometimes there's a social worker there that can help you. So speaking of, those are the other two people on the call today. I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of background on these two people just because I love them dearly. Emily is phenomenal. She's one of the CDEs and the program manager at the University of Michigan's Adult Endocrinology Clinic. And one of my favorite stories about Emily is I've called on her for years, and I don't know when it was, one of the meetings that we had, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 times down the line. I just looked at her and I said, you know a lot about this stuff. I mean, most of the time the CDEs and the doctors are coming to me for, I'm going to switch you guys back to, there we go. Most of the doctors use me as, somebody that can help and educate them and consult with them on some of the topics that we've talked about today. Again, being an expert in providing them with inside scoop on how to refer somebody for a certain product or a service or whatever. And CDEs are no different. And when I was meeting with Emily, I just looked at her straight in the eye and I said, wow, you are smart. You get this, not only from a CDE perspective, but you really understand this. And she kind of looked at me and said, Jeff, I'm type 1. I said, oh, I did not know that. So she is phenomenal because she provides, diabetes education. She works in an adult endocrinology clinic, and she provides the life experience of understanding this stuff. And then Jacinta might hate me, but I pulled out a really cool thing we did a couple of years ago. It's called My Diabetes Superhero. We put together a book, and I'm just going to say that Jacinta is such a great advocate for their patients, the pediatric patients, that this last line of this essay, she doesn't have to do any of the help that she gives me because she's not a doctor or a nurse. She just thinks I'm someone who is worth her time. That's why she's my diabetes superhero. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacinta. I think she has a lot more help and assistance on the pharmaceutical side and the medication side that she can give us, and look forward to hearing from her.
Thanks. Wow, that was quite the intro. Okay, thank you for that. That was a really nice lead in. So I'm one of the 3 clinical social workers at U of M, Peds Endo. We are a multidisciplinary team, and we are doing a lot of telehealth these days, as many providers are. And if you're wondering from the patient perspective, insurance coverage has expanded greatly for that during this time. So if that's something that you're interested in, I know that there's a big push for it right now. And I know the talk just prior to us, it sounds like a lot of people are really enjoying taking part in those. So if that's something you're interested in, we would definitely encourage you talking to your insurer and your provider to see if that's something that you can do. Also, HIPAA and confidentiality restrictions have loosened with that as well. So we're doing a lot of telehealth these days. We still do a lot of insurance navigating and helping people through barriers with insurance, children's special health care, which Jeff mentioned, and I'll talk about as well really quickly in a minute. So we're also looking into we've been compiling resources for assistance programs during this time especially. So I'll give you a little bit of a highlight of some of those things that we've compiled. A lot of them are on the JDRF website that Jeff showed you, but there's a lot of info out there. So being able to kind of distill it down, I'm hoping I can give you a little bit of an overview. So first, children's special health care. What that is, if you're not familiar, it is, so CSHCS for short. It's a program in Michigan for any child with a chronic condition from birth to age 21, 21st birthday. And essentially any of our patients with any type of diabetes diagnosis are automatically eligible just by virtue of that diagnosis and it being a chronic condition. So what happens is essentially it comes in as either a secondary or tertiary, depending on whether you have one or two, private or commercial insurances or Medicaid currently. And it's essentially a cleanup. So everything goes through your primary insurance or secondary per usual. Whatever's left over that you typically pay out of pocket, they would pay on your behalf, and it still counts toward your deductible. It's just specific only to diabetes. So diabetes care visits with your endocrinologist, specialty visits only, ophthalmology, if they can bill that once a year, depending on where you go, that should be covered as well. And then all of your insulin prescriptions, your glucagon, your pens, your syringes, all of that should be picked up as well. Currently, all of the pumps are also picked up. The balance for those is also picked up by Children's Special Health Care. Omnipod didn't used to be covered, but it is now, thankfully. The only thing that's not covered on a standard basis still is the CGMs. So that is something that a lot of people are working really hard to change and have been advocating for a long time. We're hoping to see that change come soon. Can't come soon enough. It should just be standard of care, but we're hoping that will happen soon. Right now, as it stands, there are a number of criteria for approval for Children's Special Health Care for CGMs. You have to be under 5 years old, have hypoglycemia unawareness. There's a number of other kind of caveats you could meet. And there are a lot of families that are trying to do case-by-case reviews specifically of their family, their child, if there are, sensory issues, other things that require them to be able to use that as a tool to communicate about management safely, then we've been able to have some of those successfully covered as well, but it's not a standardized thing yet, unfortunately. So Children's Special Health Care, if you have Medicaid already, it's sort of an add-on. It's very easy. It just happens when your provider sends documentation of your diagnosis and it's added on. It's there basically as a safety net. If you lose your Medicaid at any point, it provides the same support in terms of covering everything. It won't cover something, however, that your primary doesn't first cover to some extent. So that's important. So even though they'll cover the pumps, if your primary doesn't first cover it to some extent, then they won't pick it up. And then if you do not have Medicaid or you have a private commercial insurance, then you can opt in to Children's Special Health Care. And you opt in by agreeing to pay a premium or a fee based on your family size and income. If you're a dual household, it goes by the parent who claims the child on the taxes, the most recent filing. And then, so essentially what it comes down to is whether or not your premium is more or less than your co-pays or deductible. So when your child or you turn 18, that premium is based solely on the child or the teen's income, even if still living at home and with the parent. So that usually benefits people from 18 to 21, if not before then. So definitely be talking to, that can be billed anywhere in the state of Michigan as long as the provider has a Medicaid contract and as long as they're an endocrine specialist. So your primary care doctor, for instance, wouldn't necessarily be included in that. So just be aware that that exists, that it's a really great tool. And even if you don't benefit from it today, perhaps if there's a job loss, if something else changes, it can be a great tool. It doesn't require that you have a primary insurance in place. It's always available if you have diabetes. So be sure to reach out to your team if you have any questions about it. It's a really great program, something Michigan does really well. Okay, so moving on, real quick mention about supply chains. There is no disruption as far as we're aware to the global supply chains for diabetes medications, including insulin. Where you're seeing some delays, I think sometimes would be on the provider end, a little bit maybe longer turnaround time for responses to routine things. And that could be a function of an influx of more calls and people needing support, or it could also be that staff might be redeployed or redistributed to help with the pandemic, or maybe home and providing childcare or be ill themselves. So just keeping that in mind. And then the other end would be, of course, the pharmacy end. So the main thing that we're seeing there is mostly reports of being out of stock. So a few kind of tips in being proactive with that. Call your endocrine office, make sure that your prescriptions are up to date and that you have the maximum allowed number of scripts and quantity within those scripts. Keep in mind that your provider can write a prescription for whatever it is that you request in terms of amount, test strips, that type of thing, but it doesn't mean that it will necessarily be covered or approved by your insurance. Many insurers right now, so this is a key, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross, Anthem, UHC, Humana, to name a few, have announced that they're waiving early refill limits for 30-day scripts and encouraging the 90-day scripts, and encouraging that you enroll in mail order. They're also loosening prior auth restrictions. So like, whereas you normally had to wait up until a certain window right before you're due for a refill to get the other processed, those are more flexible now. So try to take advantage of that if you can. And then contacting your insurance or your pharmacy to talk about what changes they've made with the pandemic, because a lot of them have specialty like patient assistance programs that I'll mention going right now. So that would be something that maybe you could get in on, at least for the time being, that might provide a little bit of a break from what you're typically paying. I would call in advance for your refills for sure, and then ask your pharmacist if they say they're out of stock, ask them to put in a request from their wholesaler. That may help expedite things a little bit. And definitely, you know, a good pharmacist like cannot be underestimated in terms of what they can do to try to support you. So definitely be kind to them, reach out, kind of see what they have to offer, the coupons and things that they have at their disposal as well. And then again, consider signing up for mail order potentially too, which is something you might not have thought about before. So job loss, I mentioned that's coming up a lot right now during the pandemic. And then with that typically means a loss of insurance. I will say that most insurances, when you lose your job, the coverage is typically maintained through the end of that month of employment, sometimes longer, but typically just through that month. So take advantage of that window of time to refill your prescriptions, get some things in order, get as much as you can. I wouldn't say like stockpile, but people tend to kind of like get as much as they can so that they have it if they need it to bridge a gap. But that's a good time to take advantage of that. And then possibly you can join your spouse's coverage if you have a spouse. If you're under 26, you can get on your parents' plan, even if you're married. So your spouse or your children cannot, but that's something to think about too. If you just need it for you, for diabetes care, to kind of cover things, that may be something to think about as well. There's Cobra, so that is very expensive. A lot of people know about that. Essentially, that just continues the same coverage you had with your employer, but you're paying the full premium, the full rate. So that can tend to be very expensive. A cheaper potentially option, if you look on healthcare.gov and you look through the marketplace, there are a lot of options there. Still maybe sort of expensive as well, but it could be an alternative. And you may also be able to get tax credits to help pay for a plan there. And then applying for Medicaid as well. So even if you aren't eligible, your child may be eligible, or if your situation has changed, it's worth putting an application out there. The worst that they can say is no, and you know worse off. But and then considering children's special health care enrollment as well. I mentioned the assistance programs. So really quickly, all three top insulin makers have offered programs right now. So Lilly has the Lilly Cares and the Lilly Savings Cards. So they're offering most of their insulin for $35 a month copay if you have any private or commercial insurance or don't have insurance. And then Novo Nordisk is offering a free immediate supply of insulin for at least 3 months. Can be longer if you're denied Medicaid. For those who've lost insurance, you must show proof of job loss, though, related to COVID-19, or have started paying into COBRA for that to take effect. And then Sanofi has long had for lower middle income families or patients to qualify for also getting insulin for free or at a reduced cost. So the additional things to keep in mind, I mean, there are things like you can go to Walmart and buy MPH or regular Novolin for $25 without a prescription, without insurance. But just keep in mind that they work differently from analog insulin. So it's not something you would want to just go and do on your own. You'd want to talk to your endocrine provider before doing that so that they can help you figure out how to translate that in terms of your there's also things like Johnson & Johnson Patient Assistance Program, Partners for Prescription Assistance. There's a number of different databases online, RX Assist, Needy Meds, a whole host of them that essentially are databases of discount programs and coupons for a whole, every medication almost you can think of, including diabetes. So that's something to look at whether or not you're thinking about it during the pandemic. And contacting the manufacturer directly as well, which the numbers are on the JDRF website. So yes.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to give you the same warning. We're running down on time, and so we need to flip over to Emily when you can.
Perfect. That was it. Actually, I just wanted to say to then basically utilize your resources. So just like Jeff said, the JDRF has a great online kind of synopsis of each of these topics. The ADA has one as well, and you can call them, talk with someone on the phone as well, your diabetes team, and then, utilizing each other in the community because, our parents and families, you guys are the ones doing the hard work every day and navigating this, and tips and tricks that we don't. So use each other, help each other, and then let us, we're here to help you whenever you need it to. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jacinta and Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, I'm Emily Weatherup, and I work for Michigan Medicine as well. I think we're going to head into some questions here to make sure that we're able to answer as many as we can before we run out of time. But I just want to throw a couple things out there from the adult perspective. As you know, my co-panelists have mentioned, unfortunately, the insurance requirements, well, they've laxed a little bit during this time. There's still a lot of requirements that we have to meet in order to obtain some supplies, particularly those pumps and CGMs. If you're on Medicare, we know that those are actually extremely specific and strict requirements, unfortunately, and those have not changed right now. So be patient with us, you know, and your providers, your educators, your physicians, as we continue to work with you to obtain those. And as Jacinta mentioned, you know, sometimes there may be redeployment of the employees that have been previously working to provide you with those supplies as well. So call early, call frequently, and stay on top of us as we all work together to make sure we get things. So I see we have a couple questions in here.
Hey, Emily, while you're looking, I'm just going to go ahead and add something. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of advocacy out there for children's special health care to actually start paying for copays for adults with type 1 diabetes here in Michigan. It's totally ground level right now, but there's some hope because there's a state rep in the legislature right now from the UP who actually lives with type 1. So I'm going to go ahead and again ask Crystal to share my email address. If there are people here in the state of Michigan that are adults with type 1, or maybe just a caregiver, or maybe you have a young person with type 1 and you want this for the future, if you are willing to do some advocacy and write some letters to state reps and state senators, I will give you, instead of sharing it here, I will give you all of that information, because if they could open up, I guess there's they've already done it with other disease states like cystic fibrosis and hemophilia. So if they've already done it for other disease states, why not type 1?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to point out is, Jacinta mentioned you can go to Walmart to get like NPH or insulins, right? But that aren't the analog or rapid acting insulins that you might be used to. The generic brands of the insulins, like Basaglar, is the same insulin glargine as Lantus, or Admelog, that works similar to the Humalog or Novolog. Those are very reasonable to use interchangeably with the insulins you probably are familiar with too. Mm-hmm. All right, it looks like Jeff, you addressed this already. We have questions saying it would be nice if Healthy Living accepted United Healthcare. I think you answered that in your presentation, but
yeah, a real quick answer to that is we would love to do United Healthcare. We would love to be a provider for United Healthcare. They have a closed network similar to BCN, Blue Care Network in this state. A lot of times insurance plans will choose to pick one or two providers, or even a single exclusive provider. And unfortunately, when that, we have to continue to try to make a point to them that that's not in the best interest of most people with type 1. And we do that every day. We have a staff that actually work, that's their sole job, is to continue to call on those plans. But we love to provide as many people as we could. And unfortunately, when they have exclusive contracts, they only come up a couple times every couple of years. So we'll keep working on it.
So I see a couple of questions on here about the Children's Special Health Care. So is there a time frame for retroactively signing up for Children's Special Health? So for instance, if I sign up now, how far back in 2020 will it go? So yeah, so there is retroactive reimbursement when you enroll. So enrollment, the way that it works is typically it's annual based on the time of enrollment, so not calendar year. So if you sign up in July, the next following July, you'll be re-enrolling and basing that off of your potentially different tax filing for that year. The retroactive reimbursement, when you fill out your application, it says date you want coverage to begin. It typically will go back about 3 months or so. We've seen some a little bit more, but definitely it depends on who's billing it and which bills you're talking about. Typically, once you have that ID number and you're enrolled, then you can give that ID number to your healthcare provider, to your pharmacy, to your durable medical supplier, so long as they're one that can bill children's special health care, which you always want to verify. And they should be able to rebill whatever they can retroactively based off of that ID number. Pharmacies, I will say, like community pharmacies, sometimes we've had to call CVS or Walgreens, and there may be a pharmacy tech or someone who's not familiar and doesn't know that you can bill back more than 2 weeks with that because it's under the Medicaid umbrella. So we have to kind of just walk them through that or get a pharmacist who knows to kind of step in and do that for them. And then Children's Special Healthcare has their own Magellan sort of reimbursement process for outliers and things too, if needed. And your team and hopefully your advocate or social worker or CDE can walk you through that process.
Looks like we have a question related to difficulty getting through to the durable medical company, not the one Jeff's affiliated with.
Oh, good, because I got a nice little plug. I didn't get in, so.
Yeah, right. For instance, cannot get through busy lines, Dexcoms arrive late. It's a struggle every month. At what point do I switch suppliers? I recommend to my patients that whenever you are unhappy with the your provider, your supplier, right, you're in control. You're driving the boat here. So we highly suggest that you would contact your insurer. Remember, this is in Michigan especially, often primarily driven by your insurer, where you can go to receive these services. But contact the insurance company and find out where else you can go. Tell your provider, your physician rather, that you're interested in switching, and I would switch as soon as possible then. Keeping in mind that I'm not going to say may not be better, right? But everybody struggles to a certain extent. There's a lot of paperwork that all the durable medical companies have to process. Working with one or another, you may or may not find benefit that you're looking for. It depends on what the issues are. I think the customer service issue that you're dealing with here, there's probably better options provided that your insurance company allows you to go with them.
And I would just add to
and
that.
I'll say healthy living is fantastic.
And I would add to that too, when this comes up for our patients, we will recommend that you do let your voice be heard to that company. And I know some people get so exasperated, the last thing you want to do is call back, but I will say that your voice means so much more than ours or anyone else's. So if you call and you file a formal complaint or grievance, it gets logged, it gets recorded. And then if enough people do that, you know, that's potentially impetus for change. And then I would also say, if your insurer does not allow you, does not contract with anyone else, we've gotten to the point with some families where I'll have them actually call their primary insurer and have a representative or a case manager from that insurance directly deal with the durable medical supplier, because then it's sort of hands-on, like real time, you can see what we're dealing with, right? Things tend to happen a little quicker that way, or you tend to at least get a break or more support. And then, you know, reaching out to your diabetes team too, because a lot of times we have our own direct contacts there. And so we can utilize those people to kind of get things done faster, which isn't necessarily how it should be, right? But that's kind of how it ends up going sometimes.
Yeah, those are all great points. You guys actually stole a couple pieces of my thunder. But I will just add in that one little plug for us at Healthy Living. I've been flabbergasted. We had an operations manager who almost had the forethought of preparing for this here in Michigan. We're basically the first day we were able to go 100% fully staffed from home as soon as this took place. And that's a testament to one of our true dedications to the patients that we service. It was actually planned for snow days. Who knew it was going to be for a global pandemic and we were going to be home for 4 or 5, 6 weeks. But we're happy that that's been going on, and we haven't missed a phone call. We haven't missed an email. And as far as the other suppliers that may be missing calls and not returning calls, I will just say this. I'm not going to talk badly about them, but I will say this. And from my perspective and my industry experience, the bigger the company gets, the harder and the more difficult it is. The systems and the bureaucracy, the levels of bureaucracy that get put in place to take care of people with type 1, especially full line DMEs. And I mention this all the time to people. I say, you know, especially like a full line DME, imagine as a customer service person taking a phone call for adult diapers, and then maybe, I don't know, some asthma medication or something. And then the next call that they take is you talking specifically about a specific piece to their insulin pump, a specific supply, a specific CGM. They don't have the knowledge or the wherewithal to pivot and tune to that. You know, unfortunately, that's the way that happens, and it's sad. But again, every company I've ever worked at, including Healthy Living, we constantly are educating and updating and giving our customer service team additional knowledge to better understand what you're going through and why you need your things right now, both with disease state and the products and services. So, but I will just give one more thing is, again, if my email is posted on here somewhere, even if it's with another company, if you have problems, I now, because I have worked at different places throughout town, I do have what I would consider rock stars or advocates at other companies. And I will gladly, if we can't help you, I will gladly try to get you in contact with those particular people, because those are going to be the people that go to bat for you when you do need those supplies.
All right, we're at our time now. I want to thank you all for being online. I will send you the questions after, and actually I'm going to be online for a few minutes. If you guys, when you mute and turn off your videos, you can still type in answers to those questions and it will go out to everyone. And I'll leave the room open for a little bit for you to do that, because then it will also go into our history. And that way I can get these answers out to them if they're not still on. Thank you so much, all three of you, for being a part of this tonight. It was a really informative panel, something that is so necessary for everyone right now. Everybody has insurance worries of various times. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I want to thank you, all of you that have joined us tonight. It's been great to have you with us. I did learn, apparently the text act to 5371 has been deactivated. So I'm going to find out what the right thing is. And when I send the follow-up email, I'm going to include that information, because we would certainly love you as an advocate, everyone as an advocate. This has been a great evening. We're back on again tomorrow night and on Thursday night. I hope you join us. And then we're also streaming live to YouTube. We've got tomorrow one more night of Kids Camp on Facebook Live. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.